You've been trapped in your own head for too long. The noise never stops. The guilt, the worry, the constant replay of what you should have said, what you should have done. It's eating you alive. You go to bed exhausted, not from living, but from thinking. And somehow, sleep feels louder than the day. Thoughts attacking from every direction, and no off switch in sight. But what if the real problem isn't the stress, the people, or the world around you? What if it's the voice inside, the one that never shuts up, the one pretending to be you? This isn't just another video to help you relax. This is the quiet you've been begging for. Not from outside, but from deep inside your chest. The kind of silence that Buddhists train their entire lives to find, the kind that frees you. Tonight, you're going to learn something the world never taught you. You're going to experience what it's like to empty your mind without fighting your thoughts. And by the time this is over, something inside you will feel different, lighter, quieter, real. Stay until the end, because this isn't about escaping. It's about finally returning to the part of you that's been waiting in silence all along. But before the mind can be emptied, it has to be seen. Not controlled, not judged, just seen. There's a moment, a breath, a flicker of silence that lives just before a thought is born. It's not loud. It doesn't demand your attention. In fact, most people never notice it. But tonight, that's where we're going. Not into the thought, but into what comes before it. Into the space that thought tries to cover up. Into the pure awareness that's been with you all along. There's a part of the mind that doesn't speak. It doesn't have opinions. It doesn't argue. And it never tries to prove anything. It just knows. Not in words, not in pictures, but in a raw, quiet presence that existed before you ever learned to think. That's what Buddhism calls the space before thought. And it's not something you create. It's something you notice. A return, not an invention. That space is alive. It's where your peace lives. Not the peace that comes from fixing everything around you, not the kind that shows up when the bills are paid or when people finally understand you. It's the kind that was there even before you had a name. It's the you underneath the noise, the one that doesn't have anything to prove. Most people live their entire lives reacting to thoughts. One shows up and they grab it. Another appears and they believe it. Then another pulls them somewhere they didn't mean to go. Like leaves being blown by wind, they chase every single one, thinking they're in control. But there's something tragic about that, because if every thought gets attention, then the silence never gets a chance to speak. The truth is, the more you try to shut thoughts down, the louder they get. And this is where so many go wrong. Emptiness isn't about killing thoughts. It's about remembering the stillness that was always there before they showed up. Like how the ocean doesn't fight the waves, it just lets them rise and fall without forgetting its water underneath. That's how awareness works. It doesn't get pulled into every idea. It doesn't panic when a memory shows up. It sees everything, but grabs nothing. That kind of awareness isn't flashy. It doesn't shout for your attention. It's not like a thought yelling, "Look at me." It's more like the quiet behind the words, the pause between breaths, the presence that's always watching, always aware, even when the mind is too busy to notice. And once you touch that, even for a second, everything changes. you realize you're not your thinking. You're not the sadness, the anxiety, or even the joy. You're the thing that sees it all and stays untouched. And here's the part that's hard to believe until it happens. The moment you become aware before the thought loses its grip. It doesn't disappear, but it loses its power to pull you around like a puppet. You become the witness, not the actor lost in the role. And that witness, that clear, open space, is what Buddhism has been pointing to for thousands of years. No technique is more powerful than noticing. That's it. Noticing the rise of a thought, the moment just before it takes form. That split-second gap that feels empty but is actually full of presence. That gap is where your real mind lives. Not the one that speaks, but the one that watches. Not the one that plans, but the one that knows what is. And when you rest there, everything slows down. Life stops feeling like a race. The weight of past and future drops. You stop being chased by your own head. This isn't about getting better at thinking. It's about discovering what exists before thinking even begins. There's nothing mystical about it. It's not reserved for monks or meditation masters. It's right here, right now, available to anyone who's tired of being pushed around by their own thoughts. Anyone who's ready to stop trying to win an argument inside their own skull and just wants to rest. The reason it's hard to notice this space is because the mind has a habit of immediately reacting, labeling, judging. This is good. That's bad. I like this. I hate that. And every label creates a wall. Every reaction adds another layer between you and the quiet that's always underneath. The practice isn't to stop the labels. It's to see the moment before the label forms. That's the doorway. You might think silence is boring, but that's only because you haven't really tasted it. Not the silence of nothingness, but the silence that sees, that listens without needing a reply, that watches without rushing to make sense of anything. It's the deepest part of you, the one that was awake before your thoughts woke up. And when you rest in that space, even for a moment, you realize how much energy you've been wasting trying to manage the chaos in your head. The mind is a storyteller. It weaves narratives all day long. Who you are, what others think, what might happen, what should have happened. But the space before the story begins, that's truth. That's the untouched ground where no opinion has been formed yet. No fear has taken shape. No craving has sunk its claws in. Just pure, open presence. And in that presence, there is nothing missing, nothing broken, nothing to fix. Thoughts will come. That's not the problem. The problem is when they are mistaken for identity, when the thought "I failed" becomes "I am a failure." But if you sit in that space before the thought lands, you see it clearly. There is a thought arising. That's all. Not truth, not identity, just movement in awareness. Like a bird flying through the sky, it doesn't leave a trace. That's the magic of awareness before thought. It doesn't mean the end of thinking. It means the end of being controlled by thinking. It means the freedom to feel a thought without becoming it. To notice anger rising without becoming the angry person. To witness sadness without collapsing into it. You become the open sky. Thoughts are just passing weather. The mind will resist this. It will try to grab your attention. It will scream for resolution, for clarity, for a plan. But if you let those thoughts float by, like leaves on a stream, you'll find something astonishing. a presence that doesn't need anything, doesn't crave anything. It just is. That's the stillness you've been chasing in distractions, achievements, and relationships. But it was always right here, underneath the noise. There's nothing you need to do to access it. No technique, no chant, no belief system, just a gentle turning of attention, away from the content of thought and toward the space it arises in. That shift is the beginning of freedom, the beginning of emptiness, not as nothingness, but as wholeness without clutter. You can practice this anywhere, while walking, while sitting, even while lying down, listening to this. Simply notice the beginning of thought. Not the thought itself, but the flicker that comes before it forms. The slight tension in the mind just before the story begins. Rest there, no need to hold it. Just notice it, like watching ripples form on a pond. The stillness is the water before the ripple. That's the real mind. And it's always here, even when thoughts come and go. Sometimes people ask, how do I stay in that space? But that question is already a thought, already a movement away from it. The real answer is this: stop trying to stay. Just return, again and again, gently, with no pressure, with no goal. And every time you do, the gap becomes clearer. The stillness deepens, the noise softens, not because you forced it to, but because you stopped feeding it. You don't have to be perfect at this. You don't even have to be consistent. You just have to be willing. Willing to stop chasing the next thought. Willing to be quiet enough to hear what the noise was drowning out. Willing to feel what it's like to exist without needing to think yourself into being. Awareness doesn't need help. It doesn't need fixing. It's already whole, already free. The mind just forgot. It got busy trying to survive, trying to predict, trying to control. But tonight, let it rest, let it drift. Let the thoughts pass like clouds. You don't need to hold them. You don't need to fear them. Just keep noticing what's underneath. This is the beginning of an entirely different way to live, not one built on ideas, but one built on presence. A life that doesn't need to be thought about to be real. A life that starts in the space before thought and stays grounded there. And now that the mind is quieter, the breath slower, and the noise starting to fade, we can go deeper. Because this was only the first step, the first layer peeled back. There are still illusions to uncover, stories to let go of, patterns to dissolve. And in the next lesson, we'll go even further into the illusion that thought and thinker are one, and how breaking that illusion can give you a kind of peace that nothing else ever could. And now that we've started to feel what lives before thought, before noise, before identity, it's time to confront one of the greatest tricks the mind has ever played. A trick so subtle, so constant, that most people never see it. They carry it like a shadow, speak from it, suffer through it, and build their entire lives on it. It's the belief that the thoughts inside your head are you, that the thinker is real, personal, and in control. But what if that voice in your head is just noise pretending to be a person? There's a moment that breaks people open, not in a loud, dramatic way, but in a soft collapse, like a wave giving up its fight. It's when they realize, I am not my thoughts. Not, I shouldn't identify with my thoughts. Not, I try to detach. but a deep, irreversible knowing that every idea, every judgment, every replayed conversation is just passing through, and none of it belongs to anyone. Thoughts happen. That's it. They rise like wind and fall like silence. But the thinker? That's the illusion. Look at it closely. A thought appears. I'm not good enough. What makes that statement feel personal? It's not the words. It's the reflex to believe there's someone behind them, a thinker who created them, a self that owns them. But hold that belief up to the light, and it falls apart. Did you choose that thought? Did you build it from scratch? Or did it simply appear uninvited, like a bird landing on a branch? Most people live their entire lives like this. A thought arises, they attach to it, and it becomes their truth. I'm anxious instead of anxiety is here. I'm a failure instead of there's a thought about failure. But here's the truth that Buddhism has been whispering for centuries. Thoughts arise in awareness, but they are not the awareness itself. Just like a cloud floats through the sky, thought passes through the mind. The sky doesn't become the cloud. It just holds it and lets it pass. It's only when the thought is believed, when it's picked up and held like a precious possession, that suffering begins. That belief gives it power. But power isn't truth. Believing something doesn't make it real. And the thinker, the one who seems to be crafting every thought, it's not a person, it's just another thought. The thinker is a mental echo pretending to be the source. When you watch your thoughts closely, something strange happens. You start to see that they come from nowhere. They bubble up without permission. You don't decide them, they decide themselves. Thought after thought, like ripples in water stirred by unseen hands. And yet somehow each ripple says, "This is who you are," and we believe it. But here's the release. The one who believes, the thinker, is also a thought. Not a core, not a soul, not some fixed identity, just another appearance, another wave. And once that's seen, deeply seen, something inside relaxes. You stop trying to control your thinking. You stop needing every thought to make sense, because now you know the difference between thought and self. This isn't about pushing thoughts away. It's not about clearing your mind like scrubbing a dirty window. It's about sitting back and seeing that there's no one inside the thoughts. No little controller pulling levers. Just activity, just motion. You can be aware of a thought, just like you can be aware of a sound or a sensation, but you are not the sound, you are not the sensation, and you are not the thought. The belief in a thinker makes everything personal. A thought about failure doesn't hurt until it becomes my failure. A memory of pain doesn't burn until it becomes my pain. But what if there's no my in it? What if the pain is just pain, the thought just a thought, and the story just passing scenery? The ego is the story that glues all these thoughts together and calls it a person. But without belief, the glue dries up. The self unravels. Not in a scary way, but in a freeing one. The burden of being someone starts to melt. There's no role to perform, no image to protect, no narrative to defend, just presence. And that presence, the one that watches, never speaks in words. It doesn't have a voice. It has no opinion. It just sees, clearly, calmly, constantly. That's who you are underneath the noise, not the thinker, not the story, but the witnessing stillness beneath it all. When a thought appears and says, "I'm overwhelmed," awareness doesn't argue. It doesn't deny. It just sees. The thought comes, the thought goes. No need to grab it, no need to fight it. Just watching, just silence. That's what empties the mind. Not suppression, not control, but understanding. Meditation in Buddhism is not about achieving a blank mind. It's about watching the mind so closely, so honestly, that the illusion of a central thinker starts to dissolve. You don't become free. You realize you were free all along. Only the belief in the thinker kept you prisoner. People spend decades searching for peace while carrying the one thing that blocks it, the belief that they are the voice in their head. But that voice isn't even consistent. One moment it says you're great, the next it says you're worthless. One moment it wants success, the next it wants to give up. And yet we believe every word as if it came from some all-knowing source. But tonight, you get to step back. You get to watch without attaching. To hear the voice but not obey it. To feel the thought but not turn it into a life sentence. That's not denial. That's liberation. Liberation from the endless identity performance. Liberation from needing to fix every mental movement. Liberation from the inner critic, the planner, the warrior, the judge. All just thoughts, none of them you. Thought is a tool. Like fire, it can warm or burn. But when you confuse the flame for the firekeeper, you start chasing smoke. You start arguing with your own mind, hoping it will finally say something kind. But it doesn't need to. You can hear it and let it pass. You can see it and stay rooted. That's the power of knowing. The thinker is not real. And this isn't some distant enlightenment goal. You don't have to sit in a cave or chant for hours. Just try this. The next time a thought shows up, pause. Feel the space between its appearance and your reaction. That space is you. The awareness that sees the thought but isn't consumed by it. Rest there. As you fall deeper into that awareness, something beautiful happens. The inner dialogue begins to fade, not because you silenced it, but because you stopped believing in its author. And when the author disappears, the story loses meaning. The mind begins to rest, like a lake finally calming after a storm. Clear, still, deep. The most peaceful moments don't come from answers. They come when the questioner disappears, when the internal chatter slows, when there's no one left trying to explain, justify, or prove. Just breath, just presence, just now. Thoughts will still come. That's not a failure. It's nature. But now, they don't define you. They don't possess you. They're like wind brushing your skin. Felt, but not feared, not followed, not made personal. The more you rest in this knowing, the quieter the mind becomes. Because what the mind really wants isn't attention, it's understanding. And now that you understand, it's just movement, just energy passing through. It stops needing to scream. This is what empties the mind. Not force, not control, but the clear seeing that thought is not the thinker, that the stream is not the swimmer, that awareness was never a thought to begin with. It just is, silent, unshaken, free. And now that the illusion of the thinker has started to fall apart, something strange begins to reveal itself. Even when thought loses its grip, another layer of noise remains. It's quieter, more subtle, but just as powerful. It's not screaming in full sentences. It's not forming strong opinions. It's doing something far more dangerous. It's labeling everything. The mind doesn't just think, it names. It sees a tree and immediately says, "tree." It feels an emotion and instantly calls it anger or fear. It meets a stranger and throws a label like kind, weird, or not my type before the moment has even fully formed. This automatic naming happens so fast that most people live their entire lives never experiencing anything directly. Just the labels, just the mental shortcuts. And those shortcuts keep the world small, the self rigid, and the mind full. This is where a massive part of mental clutter hides. Not in dramatic thoughts, but in the constant background noise of interpretation. The brain turns every raw moment into a file. And in that filing process, the aliveness of the experience gets smothered. The more names something gets, the less we see what it actually is. Buddhism has always warned about this trap, because the moment you name something, you stop being curious about it. This is sadness. Done. That's a bird. Done. He's annoying. Done. But what if the sadness isn't just sadness? What if that bird isn't just a bird? What if annoying is actually covering up 100 other things you're feeling? The truth is, naming locks the moment into a concept. And concepts are recycled versions of reality, not reality itself. The danger of labeling isn't that it's wrong, it's that it becomes invisible. The mind starts believing it sees the truth, when all it sees are symbols. And this creates distance. Distance between you and the raw energy of the world. Between you and your emotions. Between you and the person sitting across from you. You're not seeing them. You're seeing your mind's shortcut version of them. And suddenly, life becomes a slideshow of assumptions. Language is a tool, but when the tool starts running by itself, it builds walls. Every time something is named, it's pinned down, it's frozen, it's boxed, and soon the whole world is reduced to a series of categories like labels on jars: safe, predictable, and dead. There's no wonder, no awe, no depth in a life that's constantly filtered through names. This is what Zen practice tries to point at with koans and paradoxes. It's not about confusing the student. It's about shaking them out of the habit of relying on logic and labels. It's about breaking the need to define everything. Because the moment something is defined, it stops moving. And truth is always moving, always changing, never something that can fit inside a word. Direct experience doesn't have a name. The taste of tea before you call it bitter. The sound of a bird before the word chirping enters your mind. The feeling of sadness before it becomes a bad mood. That's the real life. That's the unfiltered now. And that's the place where the mind begins to empty. This doesn't mean you should stop speaking or never use words. It means you start seeing language as a layer, not the thing itself. You start noticing when a label sneaks in and cuts you off from the richness of the moment. You stop mistaking the map for the territory, and slowly the mental clutter starts to fall away. Most people think clutter is just too many things, but mental clutter is too many names. Too many frozen ideas about what life is, what people are, what you are, and each one adds to the noise. Each label becomes another layer you have to peel back just to feel alive again. Try this. Next time you see something, anything, don't name it. Just feel it. Just look. Just sense it without the need to call it anything, and watch what happens. Suddenly, colors become brighter, sounds become deeper, time slows down, because the mind isn't busy summarizing. It's not rushing to file the moment away. It's finally here, fully. The labeling mind is fast. It doesn't like silence. It doesn't like mystery. It wants answers, categories, identities. But the more you feed it, the more rigid life becomes. The more you practice dropping the label, the more flexible the mind becomes. And in that flexibility, peace grows. Because you're no longer trying to trap the world in words. Language isn't the enemy, but unconscious language is. When the brain becomes addicted to defining everything, you stop experiencing the beauty that lives in not knowing, and that not knowing is sacred, because it leaves space for awareness, space for stillness, space for real connection. Try not naming your emotions next time they rise. Instead of calling it sadness, just feel the raw texture, the sensation in the chest, the tightness in the eyes. No need to write a story about it. No need to explain or justify. Just be with it. Let the energy be what it is, without putting it in a mental cage. You'll be surprised how quickly it softens when it isn't being narrated. The same goes for people. If you stop labeling someone as this kind of person, you start seeing them fresh. Every time. And that freshness brings compassion, because now you're not reacting to your old ideas about them. You're meeting what's actually in front of you, not the label, the life behind it. Children do this naturally. Before they learn all the words, they experience everything directly. They don't say flower and move on. They stare, they touch, they wonder. That openness is still inside you. It just got buried under years of mental labeling, but it's not gone. It's never gone. It just needs space. Naming becomes a kind of control, a way for the mind to pretend it understands life, but the more it names, the more it clings. This is mine. That's how I feel. This is what it means. But what if you stop trying to control the moment? What if you let it live without needing to define it? That's what Buddhist mindfulness really is. Not perfect focus, not constant calm, but raw presence. A moment-to-moment awareness that notices the urge to name and gently lets it go. That sees the thought, "This is boring," and chooses to stay curious. That hears the mind say, "I know what this is," and replies, "Maybe I don't." Because the truth is, we don't really know anything, not deeply, not totally. And that's not a weakness, it's a doorway. The moment you admit, "I don't know," your mind stops racing. It stops preparing, it stops filtering, and in that stop, the noise fades. Without naming, your body starts to speak louder. You feel things more fully. The breath deepens, the muscles relax. You become more present because the mind isn't trying to label or fix the experience. It's finally quiet enough to listen. This is how the grip of conceptual thinking begins to loosen, not by fighting language, but by seeing through it, by remembering that a label is just a sound, a pointer, not the thing itself. The more you return to the raw experience, the more freedom you find. And in that freedom, the mind starts to empty. Not because you shut it down, but because you stopped filling it with names. You stopped believing that every moment needs to be explained. Some moments just need to be lived, fully, wordlessly. That's what the Buddha meant when he talked about direct experience, not filtered through belief, not narrated by the inner voice, just life, unspoken and pure. And when you rest there, you realize silence is not the absence of sound, it's the absence of naming, the absence of interpretation, the absence of mental clutter pretending to be understanding. Now that the habit of labeling has started to lose its grip, something unexpected begins to surface. Beneath the words, beneath the thoughts, beneath even the silence of non-naming, there's still someone watching. A quiet presence that says, "I'm observing now." It seems peaceful at first, even spiritual, but look closer. That too is a layer, a subtle identity, a mask of control. And the mind, clever as it is, hides behind this mask thinking it has found freedom. But what if the one who watches is just another role? What if holding on to the observer is the final trap? This is where the path gets subtle, even strange. Because mindfulness, if misunderstood, can become another cage. It starts with awareness, learning to see the thoughts without following them, to witness emotion without being pulled into it. And that shift is powerful. It breaks identification. It loosens suffering. But something quiet and dangerous can happen next. The ego adapts. It puts on a new costume. I am the witness, it says. I am the one who watches calmly. And without realizing it, you've built a new identity out of detachment. It's peaceful, but it's tight. There's effort in it, a constant holding of attention, a gentle pushing away of experience, a subtle judgment about what should or shouldn't be happening. Watching becomes a job, the watcher becomes the boss, and freedom slips quietly out the back door, because true emptiness doesn't need a witness. In fact, emptiness only fully opens when there's no one left watching at all. Letting go of the observer is terrifying at first, because it feels like surrendering your last bit of control, the last thread of self. But that thread is still tension, it's still separation. And as long as the observer remains, there's always a gap between life and the one experiencing it. A split, a distance, and in that gap, suffering finds a way in. The Buddhist masters warned about this. They spoke of the watcher trap, where meditation turns into surveillance, where presence becomes stiffness, where attention turns into a silent effort to remain above the experience. But real presence doesn't hover. It dissolves, it merges, it disappears completely. There's a kind of watching that isn't coming from a person. It's just awareness, natural, wordless, free of a center. It doesn't say, "I'm here now." It doesn't claim insight. It doesn't hold a position. It just is. And that's the difference. The observer claims. True awareness doesn't. The observer separates. True awareness includes. The observer watches, like a parent watches a child. Awareness simply experiences, without commentary, without ownership. To let go of the observer is not to lose awareness. It's to lose the idea of being the one who's aware. It's to drop even the subtle I that says, "Look how present I am." It's not a movement you make. It's a soft falling back, a dissolving, a giving up of control so complete that even the one who lets go disappears. This is the final letting go, because every layer before this had something to release, a thought, a label, an identity. But this one asks for everything, even your idea of yourself as the spiritual one, the mindful one, the seeker, the awakened. All of it has to go. And what's left isn't emptiness as absence. It's emptiness as fullness, life without edges, awareness without an owner. That shift cannot be forced. It happens when the watching becomes too heavy, when mindfulness turns into tension, when the one trying to be present finally gets tired. So tired, it lets go. Not because it wants to, because it has no energy left to hold on. And in that collapse, in that surrender, silence returns. Not the silence of effort, but the silence of no one being there. Even now, part of the mind may be trying to understand this, to grasp it, to prepare to experience it. That's normal. That's just the observer tightening its grip, trying to stay in charge. But this isn't something to understand. It's something that happens when there's nothing left to do, when all trying is gone. And the watcher, who spent so long pretending to be peace, fades into the background and never returns. This doesn't mean you disappear. It means the illusion of separation disappears. Life continues. You walk, talk, breathe. But there's no sense of being the one who's doing it. It's just happening. Without a center, without commentary, without a watcher saying, "Now I'm watching." Many people stop at the witness stage. It feels safe. It feels spiritual. But deep down, they know something is still being held. Some identity is still alive, and that aliveness carries tension. If you watch it closely, you'll feel it. A tightness in the belly, a subtle fear behind the eyes, a need to remain in control. That's the clue. The watcher is still playing the game. Letting it go doesn't mean becoming mindless. It means letting experience live without being observed. Letting the moment unfold without inserting yourself into it. Without narrating, without tracking, without trying to stay present. Just being. Not being aware of being, just being. This kind of presence can't be described, because description already breaks it. It's like trying to explain silence by making noise. It's a state beyond commentary, beyond concept, beyond witnessing. It doesn't need to be maintained. It doesn't need to be remembered. It's not an achievement. It's what was always here, under the effort to be here. The observer says, "Be careful, don't lose yourself." But that fear is the last defense of the ego, because when the watcher drops, the self goes with it. And what's left is not nothingness, it's everythingness. A vast, open stillness that holds all things, needs nothing, resists nothing. It doesn't speak, but it answers every question, not with words, but with presence. Try noticing it now, not by trying to be present, but by letting go of trying to be present. Let the effort drop. Let the one who watches rest. Let the attention dissolve into the experience itself, not watching the breath, being the breath, not watching the moment, being the moment. You don't need a self to experience this. In fact, the self is what prevents the experience. The watcher is like a finger pointing at the moon. useful at first, but at some point it has to be put down. Otherwise, you keep staring at the finger and miss the moon completely. And when it goes, when the watcher finally fades, something beautiful happens. Everything softens. You no longer sit in awareness. You are awareness. The separation is gone. The distance is gone. Even the effort to be calm is gone. What remains is presence without tension, a stillness that doesn't need protecting, a peace that holds itself. Thoughts may still arise, but there's no one watching them, no one deciding what to do. They rise, they fall, they pass, and in their passing, the silence deepens. Not because you made it happen, but because the one who was trying to make it happen is gone. This is what the deepest Buddhist teachings point toward, not just quieting the mind, but dissolving the one who was trying to quiet it. Not just watching thoughts pass, but letting the one who watches pass, too. Until there's no one left to witness peace, there's just peace. And now that the watcher has been seen for what it is, just another mask the mind wears to feel in control, we come to something even more intimate, something that doesn't hide behind thoughts or pretend to be wise. It shows up raw, hot, and urgent. Emotion. The one thing that makes even seasoned practitioners flinch. Not because it's complicated, but because it feels so real. But what if emotion, too, is just a passing event? What if feeling something deeply doesn't make it true? This is where most people get pulled back in. The mind becomes quiet, the observer drops, but then a wave of sadness rises, or a flash of anger. And without realizing it, the person who thought they had emptied their mind suddenly finds themselves drowning in a storm of feeling. Not because the feeling is too strong, but because it was believed, it was touched, it was resisted, labeled, or owned. And that's when it sticks. Emotions are not problems. They're not signs of weakness or something to be healed. They are mental weather, temporary bursts of energy that pass through the system. But the moment you resist them, they linger. The moment you interpret them, they harden. And the moment you believe them, they become part of the story that keeps the self alive. The illusion is that emotion means something about who you are. I feel anxious, so I must be broken. I feel jealous, so I must be unspiritual. But none of that is true. Emotion isn't personal. It's not a verdict. It's just movement, just energy, like wind through a field. It doesn't belong to anyone. It doesn't have a message. It only asks to be felt and left alone. Buddhist teachings have always emphasized non-resistance as the key to freedom. But when it comes to emotion, non-resistance is often misunderstood. People think it means suppressing feelings, ignoring them, or pretending to be calm. But real non-resistance is deeper than that. It means allowing the emotion to be exactly what it is, without trying to fix, name, analyze, or even understand it. That kind of allowing is rare. Most people want emotions to behave, to come on time, leave quickly, and never make a mess. But emotion doesn't work like that. It arrives unannounced. It moves through the body. It shakes things loose. And if it's not interfered with, it leaves on its own, without residue, without scars. The reason most people suffer through emotion is not because the emotion itself is painful. It's because they fight it. They wrap it in language. They judge it. They ask why it's here. They tell stories around it. And every bit of that mental activity creates tension. That tension traps the emotion in place, like trying to hold water in a net. The tighter you grip, the messier it gets. Non-resistance means letting the water pass through. It means noticing the sensation of sadness without naming it, feeling the heat of anger without feeding it, observing the pressure of fear without needing to explain it. Not because you're detached, but because you're deeply present, so present that you don't need to interfere. The key is to feel without adding, to sense without spinning. Emotions, when untouched, resolve themselves. They rise, they peak, they fall. That's their nature. And if allowed to move freely, they don't leave behind confusion or pain. They leave behind space. Spaciousness is what remains when emotion completes its natural cycle. But this is hard to trust at first, because the mind is used to doing, to managing, to interpreting every feeling as a problem to solve. Why do I feel this way? What does this mean? How can I stop it? But none of those questions are useful. They're just ways the mind tries to reassert control. And control, no matter how spiritual it pretends to be, is still resistance. The moment you stop interfering, something incredible begins. The emotion plays itself out like music, sometimes loud, sometimes soft, sometimes chaotic, but it ends. Not because you stopped it, but because you let it live fully, without grasping or pushing. That's the natural intelligence of the body. It knows how to process emotion when the mind doesn't get in the way. This is why Buddhist monks don't fight emotion. They don't indulge it either. They let it rise and fall like any other experience. Not because they're numb, but because they know that emotion isn't the enemy. It's only a problem when it's believed, when it's turned into identity, when it becomes my anger, my trauma, my story. But none of those are real. They are just thoughts added to a passing wave of feeling. Letting go of emotion doesn't mean becoming cold. It means becoming transparent. So empty of resistance that the emotion passes through without finding anything to stick to. That kind of openness doesn't feel like detachment. It feels like peace, like softness, like warmth without weight. Try this the next time emotion rises. Don't name it. Don't even call it emotion. Just feel what's happening in the body, the tightness in the throat, the heaviness in the chest, the electricity in the limbs. Just feel, without comment, without story, without asking for it to change. And wait. Wait until it moves. Wait until it passes. Because it will pass. That's what all emotion does when it's left alone. The problem is never the emotion, it's the mind's reaction to it. The analysis, the suppression, the drama, the identity, all of that is noise. And once that noise drops, you realize the emotion itself was never dangerous. It was just intense, just brief, just another ripple on the surface of a vast, still lake. That stillness is who you are. The emotions are just weather. And when you stop trying to control the weather, you get to enjoy the peace of the sky behind it. That's what Buddhist practice points toward. Not a life without emotion, but a mind that no longer makes emotions into a problem. You can't stop waves from rising, but you can stop surfing them. You can sit on the shore and let them crash and fade. And in that sitting, in that patience, in that openness, something begins to shift. The emotions lose their edge, their urgency fades, not because they're gone, but because you're no longer feeding them with attention, resistance, or identity. This kind of practice brings a different kind of strength. Not the strength to hold things in, but the strength to let them move, to feel everything fully and yet not be shaken. That's not indifference. That's clarity. That's presence. That's the kind of peace that doesn't depend on mood or emotional weather. It's steady, grounded, alive. And in that peace, the mind finally finds rest. Because it's not being used to resist anymore, not being used to control, just being. And when the mind is just being, emotions become what they always were, passing energy, not problems, not truths, not who you are. Now that emotions have been felt without resistance and released without residue, a quiet clarity has begun to grow. But with that clarity comes something unexpected: insight. Realizations begin to form. Patterns become visible. The mind starts collecting lessons, pieces of truth, bits of transformation. And here, without noticing, another trap begins. Because even wisdom, if not handled carefully, turns into weight. And what was once light becomes baggage. The mind, even in awakening, has a habit of accumulation. There's something deeply seductive about insight, especially spiritual insight. It feels powerful. It gives the illusion of progress. It whispers, "You're finally getting it." And maybe you are. But the danger isn't in the realization. It's in the grip, in the mind's quiet need to store what's been seen, to own it, to repeat it, to make it part of identity. The seeker becomes the knower. The student becomes the teacher. And the openness that allowed insight in begins to close. Wisdom, when hoarded, becomes noise. Not because it's wrong, but because it's no longer alive. It's been frozen into a concept, a belief, a story. And now, instead of flowing through awareness, it clutters it. Just like too many clothes in a suitcase, even beautiful things can become a burden when packed for too long. Buddhism has always warned about attachment, not just to objects, people, or emotions, but to understanding. The mind wants to turn insight into a trophy, something to revisit, something to repeat. But truth doesn't live in memory. It lives in the moment. And the moment can't be carried. It can only be entered. There's a difference between living wisdom and storing it. When it's lived, it's invisible. It doesn't speak in quotes or flashbacks. It moves quietly. It acts without thinking. It responds without reference. That kind of wisdom leaves no trace. It rises when needed, disappears when not. It's not something you hold. It's something that flows through you. But the mind fears forgetting. It wants to write everything down, repeat it, memorize it. It's scared that if it lets go, the lesson will disappear. But the truth is the opposite. What's real doesn't need to be held. It returns when it's needed. Not because you remembered, but because you remained empty enough for it to arise again. The more insight is carried, the more rigid the mind becomes. This is how it works. This is what I've realized. This is the truth. But all of that is past. Old words trying to describe a moment that's already gone. And the moment now unfolding, it's not the same. It needs fresh eyes, not remembered eyes. There's a beauty in forgetting, not the kind that loses lessons, but the kind that makes space for new seeing. A mind that doesn't rely on what it knew yesterday is free to meet today, without filters, without assumptions. That freshness is what allows wisdom to stay alive, not repeated, but reborn. Some of the greatest Zen teachings make no sense when clung to. They aren't instructions, they're interruptions, designed to break the pattern of grasping, to shock the mind out of its storage habit, to show that truth isn't a place you arrive, it's a door that opens when nothing is carried through it. Even spiritual knowledge can become a cage. When the mind starts measuring progress, comparing realizations, quoting teachings, it's not being wise, it's being clever. And cleverness is loud. Wisdom is quiet. One talks about what it knows, the other listens to what is. Letting go of accumulated insight is not forgetting, it's trusting. Trusting that presence is smarter than memory, that clarity doesn't need a reference point, that freedom isn't built on what you've learned, but on what you're willing to release. The mind thinks, if I forget this, I'll go backward. But there's no backward on this path, only deeper. And depth doesn't come from collecting more. It comes from holding less, from becoming so empty that wisdom doesn't visit. It lives in you. Try watching how the mind wants to share insight, how it wants to explain, prove, teach. That's not wrong. But notice the tension in it, the grasping, the self-importance. That's the residue. That's where wisdom has turned into identity. And identity, even spiritual identity, is noise. True knowing doesn't need to speak. It doesn't need to convince. It expresses through being, through presence, through the silence behind every action. That's the wisdom that empties rather than fills, that leaves space rather than stories. This doesn't mean you stop reading, learning, or reflecting. It means you stop clinging. You let insights pass like clouds, appreciated but not possessed. If they return, fine. If they don't, better. Because what stays without effort is real. What needs holding is already fading. Even the teachings in this moment, these very words, are not meant to be kept. They're here to point, not to be framed, to open something, not to be remembered. The moment they become another thing you know, they've already lost their light. The Buddhist concept of non-abiding wisdom is exactly this: knowing that moves, knowing that doesn't rest in form, a kind of insight that doesn't harden. It whispers in the moment and disappears, like the bell after it rings. The echo is not the truth. The silence after is. This is why so many ancient teachers spoke in riddles, why they said things that contradicted each other, not to confuse, but to stop the mind from forming a new belief. They knew the danger of accumulation. They knew the mind would turn truth into doctrine, and doctrine into armor. But real freedom has no armor. It's soft, naked, empty. Try letting go of even your best realizations, the ones that changed you, the ones that made sense of your pain. Let them dissolve, not because they weren't true, but because truth doesn't need a frame. It just needs space. The mind will resist. It will say, "But I worked hard for these insights." That's fine. Let it grieve. Then let it rest. Because what's real can't be lost. And what can be lost was never meant to stay. A peaceful mind is not a mind full of answers. It's a mind that no longer needs them. A mind that walks into the moment without baggage, without concepts, without needing to understand everything before it's felt. That kind of mind doesn't just live Buddhism, it is Buddhism. Not because it knows the teachings, but because it reflects their spirit. A spirit of surrender, of emptiness, of being so free from needing to be right that truth flows effortlessly. Now that the grip on insight has loosened and the mind is no longer trying to hold wisdom like a possession, something beautiful begins to reveal itself. Action. Not the kind driven by thought or choice, not the kind planned by mental strategy, but a pure movement that rises from stillness itself. This is the next doorway. Action without the thinker, movement without mental noise, life unfolding through the body without interference from the mind. Zen calls this the still mind that moves, and it changes everything. There is a peace deeper than silence. It's the peace that remains untouched even when you're walking, cooking, cleaning, or speaking. Not because the world has gone quiet, but because the noise inside you has stopped claiming ownership of everything you do. Monks train for years not to learn this, but to unlearn everything that gets in its way. The belief that you must think to act, that you must plan to move, that you must know what comes next before taking the step. But the body already knows. Life already flows. You don't think your way into blinking. You don't calculate how to raise your hand. These things just happen. And that's the key. The more thinking pulls away, the more doing becomes effortless, not mindless, but unburdened. The Zen tradition doesn't aim to suppress thought, nor does it glorify inactivity. It teaches how to be so fully present that thinking is no longer the engine. Instead, attention becomes direct. Action becomes clean. There's no mental commentary standing between you and what you're doing. When sweeping the floor, the only reality is the sweep. When walking, there is only step. No need to say, "I'm walking now," just walking. This doesn't dull life, it sharpens it. When thought fades, senses heighten. You begin to feel the texture of everything, the coolness of water on your hands, the rhythm of your breath during movement, the precise sound of each footstep. This isn't mindfulness as a technique, it's life without interruption. It's what happens when the mental commentator finally goes quiet. Most people believe thinking is what makes action possible. That without thought, decisions can't happen. But that's just another belief. Every day, hundreds of movements arise before thought touches them. You turn your head toward a sound. You scratch an itch. You catch something falling. No inner voice planned those actions. They just occurred. And that same intelligence, the one behind those small, immediate movements, is more than capable of guiding your entire life. But thought wants to own everything. It jumps in right after a movement and says, "I did that," and you believe it. But the truth is, the doing was already done before the thought claimed it. There's a gap, a moment of pure flow, where the mind hasn't had a chance to insert itself yet, and in that gap, freedom lives. Zen monks wash dishes not to finish them, but to wash. They eat not to be full, but to eat. Each act is whole, not a means to an end, not a distraction, not a task on a list, just a complete experience unfolding in the now. That's the power of a still mind that moves. It's not passive, it's deeply engaged, but without noise. You can feel this difference even in small things. When you pour a glass of water while thinking about something else, it feels mechanical. But when the mind is quiet, the movement becomes sacred. Not because of the water, but because of your absence. The absence of the me that constantly narrates everything. And that absence opens space. In that space, clarity moves. This doesn't mean never thinking. It means no unnecessary thinking. It means allowing thought to rest when it's not needed. So the mind becomes like a lake on a windless day, reflective, still, ready. Then, when action is needed, it rises cleanly, like a pebble dropped in water. One ripple, one response, no excess. The beauty of this is how practical it becomes. Even in chaotic moments, the still mind doesn't panic. It sees clearly. It moves precisely, because it's not lost in stories. It's not stuck in hesitation. It's not pretending to be in control. It just acts. Like a skilled musician playing a note, not because she's analyzing, but because her hands know the way. This is not magic. It's what happens when the mind is no longer afraid of not knowing, when it no longer needs to explain each movement to itself, when it trusts that presence is enough, that listening is smarter than planning, that stillness is more powerful than thinking. Try this in daily life. Next time you walk, walk without the voice in your head describing it. Let the feet move. Let the breath flow. No script, no inner commentary. Just step. Then notice. Are you still okay? Did the world fall apart because you stopped narrating it? Or did it become more alive? This is where Zen goes deeper than just meditation. It brings stillness into motion, not by slowing down, but by removing the one who's always rushing inside your head. That silent rush, the constant push to finish, to be elsewhere, to do it better, is the true noise. And when that's gone, even the most ordinary movement becomes complete. There is no special training required, no exotic posture, only attention without agenda. You don't move to impress, you don't act to accomplish, you just act. Because life is acting through you, and when that's seen, everything becomes lighter. Tasks lose their heaviness, chores lose their dullness. Each moment becomes fresh because no leftover thought is carried into it. In this way, the still mind becomes the most effective mind, not because it's always calm, but because it's always clear, not weighed down by yesterday, not guessing about tomorrow, just responding, naturally, effortlessly. This is why Zen emphasizes things like tea ceremonies, martial arts, and calligraphy. Not for the skill, but for the presence. The art is not in the product, it's in the doing. The act itself becomes meditation, and that meditation doesn't require silence around you, only within. When you act from silence, there is no second guessing, no doubt, no overthinking. Because you're not deciding what to do, you're allowing it to happen. That kind of trust takes time, but it starts with simple things. Washing your hands, folding clothes, preparing food. All can become sacred when the doer is absent and the action is whole. And when mistakes happen, which they will, there's no judgment. because no ego was trying to prove anything. The movement was pure, the mind stayed open. Even errors become part of the flow. Not setbacks, just new ripples in the moment. The real gift of the still mind that moves is that it never burns out, because it's not working from strain, it's not forcing outcomes, it's not controlling life, it's dancing with it. And in that dance, you don't need to know the steps, you just need to listen and move when it's time. Now that movement has begun to arise from silence rather than thought, and action no longer demands the mind's commentary, something deeper begins to reveal itself. Something more persistent than thoughts, more subtle than emotion, and more convincing than any insight. It's the voice underneath all voices, the one that says, I, the self, not the body, not awareness, not presence. The self as a story, a mental figure at the center of every thought, every plan, every fear, every hope. And as long as this figure is believed in, the mind stays crowded. Even in quiet, it lingers. Even in peace, it whispers. What about me? This is the root of noise, the most disguised form of clutter, the idea of I behind every thought. I should improve. I feel bad. I'm getting it. I'm failing again. All different thoughts, but always the same author, always the same invisible assumption that someone is there, thinking them, owning them, directing the show. But that's the illusion, not just the content of the thought, but the thinker itself. The ego is not a monster. It's not an enemy. It's a habit of building everything around a center. That center becomes the reference point for all of life. Experiences are divided into good for me, bad for me, better than me, worse than me. Even silence gets filtered through this self. I feel calm. I feel still. But what if the calm wasn't yours? What if the stillness didn't need an owner? The self is just the mind folding in on itself. It creates a character called me, and then writes a full-time script for that character. The script changes. Sometimes it's confident, sometimes insecure, sometimes spiritual, sometimes broken. But the center remains fixed. I. And it's exhausting, because the story never ends. Even joy gets dragged into it. I am happy now. I hope it lasts. I must protect it. The truth is, there's no need for a center. Life doesn't need a narrator. Thoughts don't need a name tag. Emotions don't need a spokesperson. When the sense of self fades, everything else becomes lighter. Not because life changes, but because the burden of constantly interpreting everything as mine disappears. Forgetting the self doesn't mean forgetting your name or history. It means releasing the need to constantly refer back to a personal identity. It means letting go of the idea that everything must revolve around a point called me. Without that point, thoughts still come, emotions still rise, actions still happen, but they move through space, not through a person. They're not owned, they're not defended, they're just seen, felt, done. This is why ancient teachings pointed to selflessness not as morality, but as freedom. Because as long as there's a self, there's tension. There's fear of loss, fear of failure, fear of not being seen. Not because those things are real, but because the I makes them real. The self needs a future to protect and a past to defend. Without those, it loses its grip. Buddhism doesn't say the self is bad. It says the self is empty. Empty of fixed shape, of permanence, of true substance. But the mind doesn't like emptiness. It fills it with stories. It keeps gluing I onto every experience. I'm getting better. I've fallen back. I need more time. But all of those are just thoughts, not truths, not evidence of a solid self. The most peaceful moments in life happen when you forget yourself, not as an act, but as a side effect. When watching a sunset, laughing with someone, helping a stranger, creating something. In those moments, the I disappears. There's no commentary, no self-awareness, just experience, just life. And afterwards, thought returns and says, I really enjoyed that. But the truth is, you weren't there. Not the self you think you are. Just awareness, just presence. This forgetting is not dissociation. It's not a lack of presence. It's the deepest form of presence. Because the I is the final layer of distraction, the most convincing illusion. When it drops away, the mind becomes vast, the heart becomes soft, experience becomes vivid, and none of it belongs to anyone. The reason the self keeps appearing is because thought needs a subject. Language is built that way. I feel, I think, I want. But underneath the grammar, there's just sensation, just movement, just thought, without ownership, without a center. And that's where peace lives, not in the content, but in the lack of possession. Ego doesn't survive on thought alone, it survives on attention. Every time a thought about me is believed, the self gets stronger. Every time it's questioned, or better yet, not picked up at all, it fades. Not with a bang, with a gentle melting, like fog when the sun rises. Try catching it, noticing when the self appears, not just in obvious ways, but in subtle ones. I'm not doing this right. I understand now. I've lost my peace. Each sentence seems harmless, but each one reinforces a center that doesn't actually exist. The mind keeps circling a ghost, and the more it circles, the more real the ghost feels. But the body knows how to forget. When you're deeply engaged, the self vanishes. Flow states happen not because the self is present, but because it steps aside. There's no room for performance, for image, for inner commentary. Just direct experience, clean, pure, selfless. And the beauty is, this forgetting doesn't require effort. It requires surrender. Letting go of the need to be someone. Letting life move through you without claiming it. Letting thoughts pass without asking what they mean about you. Letting silence speak without translating it into achievement. Many people fear this. If I forget myself, I'll become passive. I'll lose my drive. But the opposite happens. Without self-consciousness, there's more clarity. Without the noise of, how am I doing? There's more creativity. Without protecting an identity, there's more love. The self limits everything it touches, not out of malice, but out of fear. The deepest teachings say, don't kill the ego, just stop feeding it. Let it be. Let it come and go like a shadow. Don't follow it. Don't argue with it. Don't identify with it. Just notice how often it inserts I into the center, and then look closer. What is that I, really? Can you find it? Can you hold it? Or is it just a shape made of thought? When the search ends, when the center is seen through, the whole structure begins to collapse. Not in a dramatic way, in a quiet release, like unclenching a fist you didn't know you were holding. And what's left isn't emptiness in the scary sense. It's emptiness as spaciousness, as peace without a protector, life without a mask. There's no need to say, I am awareness. That's still too much. Just awareness is enough. Not personalized, not possessed, just present, just open. The I adds nothing. It only blocks the light that's already shining. Forgetting the self isn't something to practice. It's something that happens when you stop practicing being someone. It's not a technique. It's a falling away, a soft return to what you were before you learned to narrate your existence. And that return feels like coming home. Now that the self has begun to fade and the center of I is no longer the loudest voice in the mind, something rare becomes possible. A state where action, attention, and silence become one. This is where form becomes a gateway, not a distraction, not as a technique or a performance, but as a surrender to pure presence. When the hands move without ownership, when beauty flows without the artist. This is the world of no mind. And in Zen, it's expressed not just in stillness, but in brush strokes, in tea, in motion. Here, even art becomes a path to emptiness. There's something unique about the way Zen treats form. It doesn't ask for perfection, it asks for absence. When a monk picks up the brush to begin calligraphy, the goal is not a flawless character. It's a mind so still that the ink flows without resistance. The paper doesn't receive decoration, it receives presence. If the mind interferes, the stroke reveals hesitation. If the ego shows up, the line loses its power. But when no one is there, when thinking vanishes, the mark becomes alive. No mind isn't about removing intelligence, it's about removing interference. The kind of interference that questions, judges, hesitates, or tries to control. When those layers are gone, the body moves on its own. The hand becomes part of the breath. The action doesn't come from planning, it arises directly from awareness. The brush doesn't express the artist, it expresses the moment. This kind of expression can't be taught through instruction, it has to be felt. It requires deep stillness, not as a precondition, but as the ground. A silence so full it moves, a presence so light it becomes touch, and in that merging, form becomes freedom. It's easy to miss the depth of these practices. Tea ceremony might look like hospitality, martial arts might look like combat, calligraphy might look like decoration. But in Zen, these are not hobbies, they are vehicles. Each one is a doorway that leads the practitioner out of the mind and into reality, directly, immediately, completely. The tea ceremony is a ritual of nothingness. Every motion, pouring water, lifting the bowl, presenting the cup, is done with full awareness, not to impress, not to please, just to be. The point is not the tea. The point is that in that moment, no thought leads the hand, no opinion shapes the gesture. There is no one making tea, just tea being made. And the strange thing is, when no one is making tea, the tea tastes better. Not because it's different, but because it carries no interference. The guest drinks stillness. They receive the presence that went into every motion, and that presence transmits peace, not through words, through form. The same happens in martial arts. The training is not to become strong, but to become empty, to let go of resistance so completely that the body moves before the mind has time to think, not as instinct, but as unfiltered response. The master doesn't fight with calculation. They move because movement happens. The opponent doesn't face a person. They face the absence of hesitation, and that absence is unstoppable. This is what Zen points to again and again. Not a mind that thinks about doing, but a mind that lets doing happen. No mind is not passive. It's active without strain. It's alert without commentary. And when it meets form, the form becomes alive. Calligraphy is perhaps the most naked version of this. One stroke, one chance, no revisions. If the mind interferes, the brush reveals it. If the self appears, the ink stiffens. But when the hand is moved by silence, the line becomes pure energy. It doesn't just look beautiful, it feels true, not as an idea, but as presence. This kind of art doesn't come from talent. It comes from absence, from being so still that the hand doesn't hesitate, so open that the body becomes a channel, so unself-conscious that the work no longer belongs to anyone. And that's what makes it powerful, not its perfection, but its emptiness. The modern world treats creativity as identity, as something that expresses the self. But in Zen, real art begins when the self disappears. When the work doesn't reflect who you are, it reflects what is. Not emotion, not intention, just the movement of stillness, the shape of silence. This approach changes everything. It turns every act into art. Not because of the result, but because of the presence inside it. Washing a bowl becomes a painting. Setting down a cup becomes a sculpture. There's no need for galleries, no need for audiences. The moment itself is complete, because it was lived fully, without interruption, without someone trying to be special. No mind doesn't mean not caring. It means not controlling. It means letting go of the idea that you are doing anything at all. And in that surrender, the most beautiful movements appear, not because they were designed, but because they were allowed. This is why Zen masters often speak in paradoxes. They say things like, the brush paints itself, or the hand moves, but no one moves it. To the mind, this sounds strange, but to the body, it makes sense, because the body knows how to move when thought doesn't block it. It knows how to act when there's no story being told. Try this. Pick up a pen. Don't plan. Don't think. Don't try to draw something nice. Just move. Let the hand guide itself. Notice how quickly thought wants to correct, to adjust, to criticize. Let it pass. Keep moving. Stay in sensation, not analysis. Stay in rhythm, not reason. Let the form arise from the silence, and when it ends, let it go. That's the practice. Not to improve the product, but to remove the self. To act without watching yourself act. To create without claiming the creation. And in that space, peace is not something you try to feel. It's something that expresses itself through every motion. Zen doesn't say, stop doing. It says, stop doing from the mind. Let the hands be moved by stillness. Let the feet walk from silence. Let art arise because no one is there to interfere. And when that happens, you'll see that the most beautiful actions are not the ones performed perfectly, but the ones done without a person performing them. Even mistakes become part of the dance. A drip of ink, a crack in the cup, a misstep in the form. None of it ruins the moment, because nothing was being held, nothing was being proven. The mind that doesn't cling can never be disappointed, because it never expected. It just responded. And that's what makes Zen art different. It's not about what you make, it's about how you disappear while making it. The more absent the artist, the more alive the art. The more silent the hand, the more powerful the movement. And in that space, the mind empties, not through force, but through expression. Not by avoiding form, but by going so deep into it that no one remains to claim it. Now that the body has begun to express stillness through movement, and action no longer carries the weight of a performer, the space around those actions begins to glow with a quiet power. There is a rhythm in life that most never notice, not just in what is done or said, but in what is not. Every chant has a pause, every breath a gap. Every mantra, no matter how sacred, begins and ends with silence. And it is in that silence, between repetitions, between sounds, where the deepest stillness lives. Most people focus on the mantra itself. The word, the vibration, the repetition. They believe that the sacred power lies in the syllables, and in many ways it does. Sound can cut through thought. It can stabilize attention. It can carry the mind toward presence. But if attention stays glued only to the sound, something is missed. The very thing that sound comes from and returns to. Silence. Chanting is not about filling space. It's about revealing it. The mantra is the wave. But what holds the wave? The ocean. The pause between chants is not a break. It's the doorway. In that pause, the mind is most still, not because of effort, but because it has nothing to grab. There is no word to follow, no rhythm to rely on, just stillness, hanging in the air, waiting to be noticed. That moment is delicate. Most miss it. They rush to the next repetition, afraid of losing momentum. But what they're really running from is silence. The mind doesn't know what to do with it. It can't control it. It can't explain it. So it fills it with more sound, with more repetition, with more doing. But if you stop, if you wait, if you let that space unfold without rushing past it, something begins to open. A presence that is deeper than mantra. A stillness that is not made, but discovered. The gap between chants is not empty. It's full of awareness, full of peace, full of the same essence that gave rise to the chant in the first place. It is not a pause in practice. It is the point of practice. The mantra is a tool. The silence is the destination. Buddhist masters have always pointed to this, that true meditation is not in the act, but in the awareness that surrounds the act. The same way a bell is not heard only in the strike, but in the fading echo. That fading, that emptiness, is where the mind can rest, not because it was forced to stop, but because it finally has nowhere left to go. In mantra practice, noticing the space between sounds changes everything. Suddenly, chanting becomes less about rhythm and more about surrender. The pause stops being dead time. It becomes alive. Alive with subtle presence. Alive with the flavor of something deeper than words. Try listening for that gap. Really listen. Not just with your ears, but with your whole being. Let the final syllable dissolve. Let it fall into silence. And then stay there. Don't rush the next sound. Don't try to maintain the rhythm. Let the silence guide you. Let it tell you when to begin again. What you'll find in that space is not boredom, not nothingness, but clarity. A kind of soft alertness that doesn't speak, that doesn't move, but it knows, it watches, it holds everything. That is the silence between the chants, not a void, not an absence, but the deepest kind of presence. This silence is not waiting for the next mantra. It's not transitional, it's complete. If you stopped there, if you never said another word, you would still be practicing, because now the practice is no longer in repetition. It's in awareness. Noticing without grasping, resting without seeking. The reason the mind skips over this space is because it's not impressive. There's no sound to measure, no phrase to remember, nothing to do. But that's exactly why it's powerful. It cannot be used by the ego. It offers no identity, just stillness. And for a mind addicted to activity, that's terrifying. But for a heart ready to rest, it's everything. Even outside of formal chanting, this principle applies. In conversation, between words, there is space. In walking, between steps, there is rhythm. In breathing, between exhale and inhale, there is a natural still point. And in all of these places, silence lives. Not the kind of silence that is forced, but the kind that simply exists when nothing is added. This is not about avoiding sound. It's about noticing the space that makes sound possible. Without silence, there would be no room for mantra, no contrast, no beginning or end. Silence is not the opposite of chanting. It's the womb it's born from. And when you become aware of that, the mantra stops being the focus. The space becomes the teacher. Chanting from this awareness becomes lighter. You're no longer trying to reach a state. You're resting in the one that's already here. The words rise like waves and fall back into stillness. And that stillness becomes more familiar, more trusted, no longer something you chase, but something you remember. The mind doesn't like this shift. It wants the active role. It wants to feel like it's doing something. But the deepest peace arises not when the mind succeeds, but when it steps aside, when it allows the silence between the chants to speak louder than the chant itself. Let yourself pause longer between repetitions. Don't count the seconds. Don't worry about losing the thread. Just stay with the echo. Stay with the stillness. And notice what happens to the body. The breath softens. The chest opens. The forehead smooths. The nervous system begins to remember its original rhythm. One that doesn't rush. One that doesn't panic. This space is healing. Not because it adds anything, but because it takes nothing away. It holds everything as it is. No fixing, no chasing, just presence. And in that holding, tension unwinds, thought slows, identity loosens. You're not trying to reach emptiness, you're being held by it. This is where mantra becomes more than sound. It becomes a bridge, a wave that leads to the shore of stillness. But the wave is not the end. The end is when you step off the boat, when you stop chanting and simply are. Not as a technique, not as a goal, but as natural rest. Many people chant for hours and never enter this space, not because they can't, but because they never stop doing. But the space is always there. It doesn't need hours. It needs attention, willingness to pause, willingness to listen to what has no voice. The gap between chants is a kind of death, a temporary end of sound, a moment without identity. And if you stay with it, if you don't rush the next breath or the next word, you'll begin to feel something deeper than calm. You'll feel yourself disappear. Not in a scary way, in a peaceful one. The one who was chanting is gone. The one who wanted results is gone. What remains is simple, silent, awake. This is why mantra is not just about repetition. It's about rhythm. And in every rhythm, there is rest. If you never pause, it's not music, it's noise. The beauty of mantra is not in its volume, but in its balance, between sound and silence, between doing and being, between self and stillness. Now that you've begun to feel the richness of these gaps, you're not just practicing mantra, you're practicing letting go, of control, of progress, of the need to fill every space. And that letting go will carry into every part of your life. You'll begin to notice pauses where you used to push. You'll hear quiet where you used to hear nothing. Now that the space between sounds has been touched and silence is no longer something to fill, but something to enter, the mind begins to reveal its last defense, movement without reason. Not words, not planning, not even craving, just stirring, like water that never clears because it keeps being shaken. And the more we try to settle it, the worse it gets. Thoughts become cloudy, emotions turn thick, clarity vanishes. But the problem isn't the content, it's the constant movement. What if peace doesn't come from solving what's inside the water, but from not touching it at all? The ancient metaphor is simple: a bowl of water filled with mud. If left alone, the dirt settles, the water clears. But if stirred, even with good intentions, it stays murky. This is the nature of the mind when it's agitated. Thoughts rise. We try to fix them. More thoughts appear. We analyze, we resist, we search for the cause. And with every mental movement, the water stays dark. Not because clarity is far, but because stillness hasn't been allowed to do its job. Stillness is not a tool. It's a condition. Like gravity, it doesn't need belief or effort. It works on its own. But the mind doesn't trust that. It's been trained to do something, always. Even when suffering, it wants to help. So it tightens, it thinks harder, it seeks answers. But what if the most healing thing the mind can do is nothing? Doing nothing is not passivity. It's allowing. It's the absence of manipulation, the gentle refusal to interfere. When the mind is stormy, the instinct is to react, to fix the feeling, to distract from it, to explain it. But each reaction becomes a new ripple. Each analysis is another hand stirring the bowl. The real freedom begins when the stirring stops. This isn't a mental technique. It's a shift in posture. Instead of meeting thought with thought, meet it with space. When emotion rises, don't chase the story. Don't search for meaning. Feel the weight of it, but let it be. Stay with the energy, but don't label it. Just sit, just rest. Let the dust settle. The mind may scream, but this is dangerous. I'll drown in this feeling. I'll stay stuck forever. That's the fear of stillness. But stillness has never drowned anyone. It's not the water that overwhelms, it's the thrashing. When the fight ends, the body floats. When the fixing stops, the peace appears, not as something added, but as something uncovered. Thoughts are natural. They come like wind. They pass like clouds. But what makes them heavy is the belief that they need your attention, the assumption that every thought requires a response, that every emotion needs a solution. But that's just conditioning. Truth doesn't need to be managed. It reveals itself when space is given. This is why meditation is often misunderstood. People think the goal is to stop thought, to push away distraction. But the true practice is to stop interfering, to let the river run without trying to build a dam, to sit by the stream, not jump in and rearrange the current. Try this. Next time your mind is cloudy, don't search for clarity. Don't reach for answers. Sit down, close your eyes, feel the restlessness, and don't move, not physically, not mentally. Don't argue with what's happening. Don't analyze it. Just be with it, like sitting beside a friend in silence. Let the thoughts swirl. Let the feelings churn. But you stay still. At first, the mind will resist. It will beg for distraction. It will claim urgency. But if you don't follow, if you stay still, something begins to shift. The turbulence loses its power, not because you solved it, but because you stopped feeding it. And slowly, like sediment sinking to the bottom, the mind begins to clear. This is not a one-time event. It's a way of being, a way of relating to thought, not as something to conquer, but as something that passes. Turbulence is not a flaw. It's just what happens when stillness hasn't had a chance to work. The healing is built in, but it only happens when you stop interfering. Even in daily life, this applies. When someone says something upsetting, the reaction rises fast. A story forms. A defense builds. But if you pause, if you let the response pass without grabbing it, clarity returns. Not because you figured it out, but because you didn't add to the ripple. Clarity is not something created. It's revealed. The more space you give, the more the natural intelligence of stillness shows itself. And it's deeper than logic. It doesn't come in words. It comes in peace. Not peace as an idea, but peace as the absence of disturbance. This is what the Buddha pointed to, not a mind that controls itself, but a mind that no longer interferes with its own movement. A mind that trusts its own stillness, that knows silence is not the lack of something, but the presence of everything that doesn't need to be controlled. When you begin to live this way, a new kind of confidence forms, not based on knowing what to do, but on knowing that you don't have to do anything, that life unfolds, that emotion fades, that confusion resolves, all on its own when given the space. This isn't resignation, it's wisdom. It's the deep recognition that the mind doesn't always need help, that peace isn't on the other side of effort. It's underneath it, always waiting, always available. Just one breath, one pause, one moment of non-doing away. Now that the muddy water of thought has begun to settle and peace is no longer something chased but something uncovered, a deeper layer of noise starts to rise to the surface, not in the form of words or emotions, but in the weight of what was. The past, not as an event, but as a story that never stops being told. It echoes in the mind's quiet moments, inserts itself into daily decisions, and keeps reappearing in the way we see ourselves. Memory doesn't just store, it binds. And as long as those bindings remain, the mind can't fully empty. Silence can't stay where the past is still being repeated. The mind believes memory is identity. It ties everything to what came before. This is what I did. This is what happened. This is who I am. And those statements feel safe. They give structure, but they also create walls. A mind full of past stories cannot see clearly. It filters every new moment through old meaning. It projects the past into the present and calls it truth. But it's not truth. It's residue. Buddhism teaches that clinging causes suffering. And one of the deepest forms of clinging is not to people or things, but to memory. Not to what actually happened, but to the version the mind keeps repeating. The event is over, but the mental movie never ends. The same scenes replay, the same feelings are rehearsed, the same blame is assigned, and with every replay, peace slips further away. Letting go of memory doesn't mean forgetting. It means loosening the grip. It means allowing the story to fade instead of feeding it. The past doesn't hurt you. It's the clinging to the past that does. It's the identification, the belief that what happened is who you are, but nothing that happened in time can define what is timeless, and your awareness is timeless. The past lives only in thought. When thought is quiet, memory has nowhere to live. This doesn't mean denying what happened. Pain, loss, mistakes, they're part of human experience, but they don't need to be carried. They don't need to be folded into identity. They don't need to be kept alive through constant mental repetition. The pain was real, but suffering is what happens when pain becomes a story that never ends. Letting go begins with seeing the pattern. Watch how the mind circles old moments. See how it brings up conversations that ended years ago. How it judges you for what you didn't know then. How it punishes you for being human. These thoughts seem automatic, but they stay alive only because they are believed. You don't need to argue with the past. You only need to stop holding it. When a memory arises, let it. Don't follow, don't resist. Let it appear like a bubble in water, and let it pop. No need to grab it. No need to explain it. Let it move through. Memory is not a problem when it's not being possessed. This is what Buddhist letting go practice teaches. To unbind from memory, not with force, but with space. When the memory appears, stay present, stay in sensation, feel the body, feel the breath. Let the image pass like wind. Don't attach, don't react. Just return to now, because now is the only moment that can hold peace. The past cannot be changed, but your relationship to it can be. And when you stop identifying with it, it loses its weight. The voice that used to say, "I was hurt," begins to soften, until it no longer says anything, It simply leaves, and with it, the noise dissolves. This doesn't mean you erase your story. It means you stop living in it. The memory can remain in the background, like an old book on a shelf, but it no longer needs to be opened. It no longer needs to be reread. The shelf remains, but the hands no longer reach for the pages. Most of the mind's noise comes from trying to maintain the past, to protect it, to explain it, to find justice in it. But justice doesn't heal. Presence does. The nervous system doesn't need closure. It needs space. Stillness is more powerful than resolution. You don't need to rewrite the story. You just need to stop rereading it. The ego resists this. It says, but this happened. It matters. And yes, it happened. Yes, it shaped you. But it's not you. You are not what happened. You are the awareness that noticed it, the space it passed through. And that space is still here, untouched, unscarred, silent. Even the most painful memories begin to soften when they're no longer narrated. Not because the pain disappears, but because the clinging does. The pain may still arise, but without the story, it moves like weather. It visits, it leaves, and it doesn't leave behind a wound. Try this. When a painful memory returns, don't brace. Don't analyze. Breathe. Feel the weight of it in the body. Stay with that, not with the images, not with the voice, but with the energy. Let the memory be seen as a sensation, not a fact. Don't ask why it's here. Don't try to fix it. Just let it pass. This is the practice of unbinding, not erasing, not suppressing, just no longer fueling. When the mind is no longer rewarded for replaying, it stops replaying. Like a flame without air, it goes out on its own. Over time, what used to feel heavy starts to dissolve. The moments that once hurt to remember lose their sharpness, not because you healed them through effort, but because you gave them space to leave. Just like muddy water, the past settles when it's left alone, and in its place, quiet grows, not empty quiet, alive quiet, a stillness that listens, that holds you, that doesn't ask for stories, just presence. That's the real gift of letting go, not freedom from memory, but freedom from identification. You stop being the one who suffered. You return to the one who saw it all without being harmed. Now that the grip of the past has begun to loosen and memory is no longer treated as identity, the mind becomes spacious in a new way. But even in this space, something keeps moving. Thought. Not loud or dramatic, just steady. Whispering opinions, offering conclusions, suggesting fears. And it's not the presence of thought that keeps the mind full, it's the belief in it, the automatic agreement, the silent, unconscious yes we give to every mental voice. But what if thoughts were never meant to be believed? What if they're just appearances, like clouds drifting through awareness, not facts to be followed? The truth is, the mind produces thoughts the way the body produces breath. They rise without permission. They appear without effort. Most people never question this. They assume that if a thought appears, it must mean something, that it must be important. But the vast majority of thoughts are not important. They are echoes, residue, mental reflexes conditioned by years of repetition, and they don't need to be believed. They only need to be seen. Belief is not something obvious. It happens automatically. A thought appears. I'm not doing enough. And before you even know it, your body tightens, your breath shortens, your chest contracts, not because of the thought itself, but because you believed it, without challenge, without awareness. That belief became suffering, not the thought. Watching a thought without following it changes everything. It doesn't require suppression. It doesn't require fighting. It requires a shift in relationship. You become the witness, not the participant. You observe without reacting, without agreeing, without adding more noise. Buddhist practice has always emphasized this, that liberation comes not from perfect thoughts, but from seeing thoughts as they are, just thoughts, not truths, not evidence, not instruction, just passing mental events, like wind through an open window. You don't have to close the window, you just stop chasing the wind. This doesn't mean you try to make the mind silent. It means you stop mistaking its noise for guidance. The mind can speak, it can even shout, but it loses power when you stop nodding to every word, when you see the thought and choose not to follow. This takes practice, because the habit of belief is old. A thought about failure feels like identity. A judgment feels like reality. But if you stay with it, if you pause before responding, you start to see the gap, the moment between thought and belief. And in that gap, freedom lives. Try this. When a thought appears, name it silently, not its content, but its category. Planning, judging, worrying. This helps create space. It reminds you that the thought is a type, not a truth. Then let it pass, like noticing a car drive by. You saw it, you didn't get in. This skill changes the way you live. Instead of reacting to every mental suggestion, you begin to choose, not from control, but from awareness. Not because you mastered the mind, but because you stopped believing everything it said. Thoughts often carry emotion. They don't respect me. I'm not enough. These lines carry pain not because they're true, but because they're believed. The pain is not in the thought, it's in the agreement, the automatic yes that turns thought into suffering. But when you stay rooted in awareness, thought becomes light, not heavy, not dangerous. It floats through, it doesn't grab, it doesn't stick. Even painful thoughts begin to pass, not because they were solved, but because they were not held. The less you believe your thoughts, the quieter the mind becomes, not by force, but by disinterest. The thoughts may still appear, but without belief, they don't grow. They don't feed on attention. They simply rise, flicker, and fall. This is where inner spaciousness begins, not in having no thoughts, but in having no loyalty to them, no attachment, no identification. The thoughts become weather, and you are the sky, untouched, ever present, clear. Sometimes the mind will test this. A strong thought will arise. This is urgent. This can't wait. And the body will tighten again. That's the pull of belief. But pause, wait, ask, is this true? Not as a mantra, but as an honest check. Is it a fact or just a familiar voice? Most thoughts are not original. They are recycled, repeated thousands of times, and yet each time they feel new, because they're believed again. But if you begin to see the pattern, belief weakens. You start to recognize the thought without falling into it. Ah, this is the old fear again. There's that story of not being enough, and you let it pass, not with effort, but with space. There is no need to silence the mind, only to step out of its echo. Thoughts will rise. Let them. Thoughts will speak. Hear them, but don't answer. Don't debate. Don't grab. Just let the show play without becoming an actor in it. This is where deep peace grows, a kind of stillness that exists not because thought is gone, but because belief is gone. You no longer confuse mental noise with truth. You no longer chase shadows. You sit, you see, you stay open, and in that openness, life changes. Not dramatically, not loudly, but gently. You stop reacting to every emotion. You stop defending every opinion. You stop performing for every imagined audience. Because the voice that demanded all that, it was just a thought. And now it's no longer believed. Over time, the mind starts to settle, not because it was tamed, but because it was met with stillness. Thought begins to respect space. It doesn't push as hard, it doesn't scream as loud, because it no longer gets rewarded with attention. And when it does push, when the thoughts feel overwhelming, you remember the truth, that nothing the mind says is you, that no belief is required, that awareness doesn't need to explain itself, it just sees, and that seeing without belief is freedom. Now that thought no longer has to be believed, and the mind has begun to loosen its grip on internal dialogue. A new layer of tension quietly reveals itself, less obvious, more subtle, but just as binding. The need to get it right. The invisible pressure to be calm enough, focused enough, spiritual enough. It's not loud. It wears the face of sincerity. It hides behind discipline. But underneath it is fear, not of failure, but of being imperfect in the one thing that was supposed to bring peace. And that fear, when left unseen, becomes the very noise that the practice was meant to dissolve. This is the paradox. The mind sets out on a path to find stillness, and somewhere along the way, it turns the path into a performance. Meditation becomes a test, silence becomes a benchmark, insight becomes a trophy, and the mind, even as it bows, quietly asks, "Am I doing this right?" That question, repeated over and over in different forms, becomes its own form of agitation, a kind of spiritual perfectionism that never allows the heart to rest. In Buddhism, this tendency is known. It is spoken of not with judgment, but with compassion, because the desire to get it right comes from pain. The longing to be free turns into a hunger to perform freedom. The ego sneaks back in, wearing robes, reciting mantras, sitting perfectly still. But behind the posture is a tightening, a subtle panic that says, "If I don't do this right, I'll never be free." But peace does not arrive through performance. It arrives through surrender, through softness, through letting go of the need to improve every second. The mind cannot create emptiness by force. It cannot reach stillness by trying to be good. Stillness appears when the trying stops. This doesn't mean practice is unimportant. It means the quality of the mind during practice matters more than the structure of the practice itself. You can sit perfectly still for hours and still be lost in the noise of trying to get somewhere. Or you can sit with your back curved and your breath uneven and fall into presence, because you're not pretending. The trap of getting it right shows up everywhere. In how you breathe, in how you speak, in how you reflect, even in how you let go. The mind turns everything into a checklist, a method, a competition. But there is no perfect breath, no perfect mantra, no perfect awakening. There is only now. And when now is no longer being judged, something real begins to unfold. That realness doesn't look impressive. It's quiet, messy, sometimes emotional, sometimes confusing, but it's honest. And in that honesty, the mind stops performing. The heart opens, not to some imagined ideal, but to what's actually here. Trying to be more spiritual is still trying to be someone. It's still effort tied to identity, and identity is the root of mental noise. The need to be a certain way, even a calm way, adds pressure, and pressure adds thinking. So the more perfectly you try to sit, the more tightly you grip, and the tighter the grip, the more distant the silence feels. Surrender isn't giving up on practice. It's giving up the image of the perfect practitioner. It's letting go of the story of progress. The myth of enlightenment as a polished state. True freedom isn't shiny. It's simple. It's ordinary. It's so close that the mind misses it, because it's trying too hard to be elsewhere. One of the deepest acts of freedom is to stop improving, not out of laziness, but out of trust. Trust that you are already held. That awareness is already here, that you don't have to earn peace. You only have to stop reaching for it like a prize. The need to get it right also shows up in how we judge our thoughts. I shouldn't be thinking this. I should be more detached. But the thought is not the problem. The judgment is. It adds a second layer of tension, a second layer of resistance, and resistance is noise. The moment you stop judging the moment softens. It doesn't become perfect. It becomes open, and openness is what allows silence to return, not because you made it happen, but because you stopped interfering. Even the thought, "I'm not doing this right," is just another thought. It doesn't need to be solved. It doesn't need to be corrected. It just needs to be seen. And then let go, like every other cloud in the sky. Let it pass. The same applies to emotion. Many people believe they must be calm to be spiritual. But calmness is not always available. Sometimes the body is agitated. Sometimes the heart is heavy, and pretending otherwise is another form of violence. Real practice allows the storm. It doesn't suppress. It doesn't fix. It stays present, even in the noise. This is how silence becomes unconditional, not dependent on mood, not tied to behavior. It's the kind of silence that can sit in the middle of sadness and still be free, because it's not trying to change the sadness. It's not trying to make it spiritual. It's simply here. And in that kind of presence, the mind slowly learns something new. That stillness is not a goal. It's a default. A home it returns to when it stops chasing every improvement, every concept, every badge of progress. Progress is not the goal. Peace is. And peace often comes not through steps forward, but through releasing the idea that you ever needed to move at all. The only journey is from tension to rest, from pretending to presence, from control to surrender. Try this. Next time you meditate, drop the script. Don't try to be focused. Don't try to be still. Just sit. Let the body breathe. Let the thoughts pass. Let the emotions come and go. Don't correct anything. Just notice what happens when effort fades. You may find that the stillness was always there, beneath the effort to create it. This way of being is not lazy. It's deeply alive. It doesn't abandon care. It releases control. It doesn't stop practice. It deepens it. Because now, the practice is not about success. It's about honesty. It's about showing up without the costume, without the performance. Even the most advanced practitioners fall into the trap of trying to get it right. But the moment they stop trying, they return to the path. Not the path they imagined, but the one beneath their feet, the one that has always been there, quiet, unmoving, patient. Now that the need to get it right has begun to dissolve, and the mind is no longer tightening around practice like a test to be passed, a softer awareness begins to settle in. One that doesn't chase progress or measure calm, one that doesn't ask, "Am I doing this correctly?" but instead listens gently for what's already here. And what's already here, beneath every effort and every moment of surrender, is breath. Not just the rise and fall, not just the inhale or the exhale, but something even quieter, the space between them. That pause, brief, natural, often ignored, is one of the most profound gateways to stillness the body offers. There is a moment right after you breathe out and before you breathe in again when the body does nothing. A pause. It isn't forced. It isn't dramatic. It's so subtle that it's easy to miss. But in that space, everything stops. There is no doing, no control, just stillness. And in that stillness, the mind also has a chance to rest. Not by shutting down, but by not being needed. This moment is pure. It holds no desire, no resistance. It's not about extending it or holding your breath. That would be interference. It's about noticing what's already happening all the time, right under your awareness. The pause has always been there, but only when the mind becomes gentle does it start to notice it. And when it does, something shifts. Because in that pause, there is no identity, no thought, no role to play, just presence, resting. The breath teaches this without words. Inhale brings life. Exhale releases. But the pause is beyond both. It is not arrival or departure. It is space, a soft, brief, sacred silence. And the more attention learns to rest in that silence, the more the mind remembers its original nature, not noisy, not chaotic, but open and still. This awareness can't be forced. If you try to chase the pause, it disappears. If you try to stretch it, it tightens. You don't need to capture it. You only need to feel it. When you exhale, simply wait. Let the next inhale come on its own. Don't reach for it. Don't guide it. Let it come when it's ready. And in that waiting, in that small space where nothing is happening, feel what remains. That stillness is not emptiness in the cold sense. It's warm, supportive. It's the original silence before the breath, before the body, before the mind started naming everything. And because it comes without effort, it brings a deep kind of rest, the kind that thinking can't give, the kind that trying only disturbs. People often look for peace in what they can do, in what they can change. But the deepest peace isn't found in doing. It's found in noticing what doesn't need to change. The pause between breaths doesn't need improvement. It's already perfect. It's already full. It doesn't perform. It simply exists. And when you rest there, even for a moment, you begin to feel how little the mind needs to do in order to be at peace. Over time, awareness begins to settle into that space naturally, not as a technique, but as a return. You find yourself resting in the breath's absence without even trying. It becomes a habit, not of control, but of presence. A quiet confidence grows, not because the mind is thinking less, but because it's holding everything with more spaciousness. In this space, the mind stops being a manager and becomes a mirror. It stops trying to shape reality and starts simply reflecting it. The breath continues. The body moves. Thoughts still come and go. But you are not tangled. You are the stillness behind the breath, the space inside the pause, the awareness that watches without needing to name. This changes how the rest of the breath feels too. Inhale becomes softer. Exhale more complete. Because you're no longer pushing from one to the next. You're letting them unfold. The breath becomes not just a function of the body, but a rhythm of peace. A cycle of letting go. A movement that carries you back to silence again and again. It's important to see that this silence isn't something added. It's revealed. The breath doesn't create it. It uncovers it, like a tide that recedes and shows the still ocean floor. That floor was always there, but only when the waves pause do we see it clearly. That clarity begins to bleed into everything, not just in meditation, but in walking, speaking, listening. You start to notice pauses between thoughts, between words, between moments. And each one becomes an invitation, not to do more, but to be still. The world is not short on noise, but it is starving for pauses, for space, for moments when nothing needs to be said, nothing needs to be explained. The breath's pause is your teacher in this. It shows that silence is not a threat, it's a return, a home that was never gone, just covered by sound. This is why the pause matters so deeply, not because it's long or dramatic, but because it's real. It's untouched. In that moment, you are not your story. You are not your plans. You are not your doubts. You are simply here, alive, aware, free from the mind's grip. Let yourself rest in that more often, not by force, but by invitation. When you exhale, feel what's left behind. Don't rush to inhale. Wait. Trust. Let the breath return on its own. And while it does, feel the ground of being that never left you. Feel how, in that pause, nothing is missing. You might start to notice that peace is not an experience. It's a background, one that is always here, revealed most clearly in the absence of activity, in the space between one thing and another. The pause is not a gap between breaths. It is the breath's source, its silence, its soul. Now that attention has begun to rest in the space between breaths and silence has been touched without effort, it becomes easier to notice the subtle noise that keeps returning even in stillness. Not loud, not chaotic, but steady. The inner narrator. That quiet, continuous voice inside the mind that labels every moment, judges every feeling, explains every detail. It talks while you're eating. It comments while you're meditating. It even whispers during peace. It doesn't stop because no one ever questions its authority. But that voice is not the self. It's not truth. It's just habit. And it can be seen. And when it's seen clearly, it can go quiet. The inner narrator is one of the last masks of mental attachment. It doesn't sound aggressive. It sounds helpful, innocent, even wise. This is a good moment. That thought was unnecessary. You're getting better. But all of it is commentary. All of it is noise. And the problem isn't what it says. It's that it's saying anything at all. Buddhism points to this directly, that the mind's need to explain is itself a kind of suffering, not dramatic suffering, subtle. Background tension that never lets you fully land in the now. Because even when things are quiet, the narrator keeps narrating the quiet. It keeps inserting a self between experience and awareness. And as long as that self exists, the mind can't be empty. This isn't about judging the narrator, it's about understanding its purpose. The mind narrates because it believes it has to. It believes life must be understood, interpreted, labeled. But what if none of that is necessary? What if life, in its raw form, doesn't need explanation? What if the sky doesn't need to be called blue, the feeling named calm, the silence translated into meaning? The first step in softening the narrator is noticing it. Noticing how quickly it comments on everything, how it gives feedback on your breath, how it evaluates your practice, how it turns even stillness into a story. This is good. Keep going. Or, you lost it. Try again. That's not awareness. That's thinking disguised as insight. To break this pattern, don't fight the narrator. Fighting is still engagement, still belief. Just notice the commentary and let it pass. Don't answer it. Don't argue with it. Let it speak and let it fall away, like background radio in a room you're no longer listening to. Eventually, the narrator loses energy. It speaks, but it doesn't land. And then it pauses. Not because you silenced it, but because you stopped fueling it. Silence doesn't come from suppression. It comes from disinterest, from letting go of the belief that commentary is necessary. Try listening to a moment without thinking about it, noticing sound without saying what it is, feeling the body without labeling it. Let experience be raw, undivided. Let the world touch you without explanation. This is not blankness, it's presence. It's what happens when the filter of interpretation drops. The narrator often returns through identity. I'm doing well. I should be further along. That's the ego pulling strings. It keeps the commentary alive by making it personal. But the moment you stop believing the commentary refers to a real self, it starts to dissolve, because it has no anchor, no one to speak to. One powerful practice is to sit with sound. Let it rise and fall without naming it. A bird, a truck, a breath. Let them all pass like vibrations, not objects. No narrative, no identification, just waves of sensation. When the narrator tries to step in, that's a dog barking. Notice it and let it pass too. You don't need to say what you hear to experience it. The same applies to emotion. Feel sadness without calling it sadness. Don't narrate its meaning. Don't measure its depth. Just stay with the sensation. Let it rise. Let it fall. The moment you name it, you create distance. But if you remain with the raw feeling, the narrator has no role to play. This is what makes the practice so powerful. You're not removing anything. You're just no longer dividing the moment with words. You're no longer carving the world into pieces. And in that unity, the mind becomes quiet, not because it was forced, but because it was no longer needed. When narration stops, something unexpected appears, a kind of intimacy. You begin to feel life without buffer. Sound is crisper, light is softer, breath is deeper. Everything becomes more real, not less. Not because the world changed, but because you're finally meeting it without commentary. It can be disorienting at first. Silence feels strange. The mind feels empty, and the narrator says, "Something's wrong. This is too quiet." That's just another comment. Let it go. Don't fear the silence. Let it grow. Let it show you what's underneath all the mental noise. Not just stillness, but freedom. Not absence, but peace. Buddhism offers techniques to help this process. One is noticing the second arrow. The first arrow is the sensation, the raw experience. The second is the story the narrator tells about it. That hurt. I shouldn't feel this. Drop the second arrow. Stay with the first. No analysis, no feedback. Just sensation. Another method is using gaps in daily life. Between one task and another, pause, breathe. Notice the moment before the mind speaks. Rest there. Extend that gap. Let it become natural, a new rhythm, where narration loses its urgency and presence takes its place. The goal is not to become thoughtless. It's to become unbound, to let thought arise and fall without wrapping it in story, without making it mean something about you, without using it to decorate experience. Life doesn't need a narrator. It only needs awareness. And when narration returns, and it will, meet it gently. Don't scold it. Don't cling to it. Just say, "There you are," and let it go, like seeing an old habit walk by. Familiar, but no longer in charge, no longer needed. Now the mind begins to settle into something deeper. It no longer organizes the world with words. It no longer explains every sensation. It just rests, not in blankness, but in presence, in being. Now that the inner narrator has begun to quiet, and the need to interpret every experience has been exposed for what it is, a reflex, not a necessity, the mind begins to taste a silence that doesn't depend on understanding. But something still lingers, a quieter craving, the need for meaning, not loud, not obsessive, but always present in the background, as if every breath, every pause, every moment must justify itself, must be useful, must have a reason, and that subtle need becomes a weight. It turns life into a search. It makes silence feel like emptiness. But silence is not empty. It's full, and not every moment needs to mean something for it to be sacred. The mind is addicted to meaning. It wants to extract value from everything, to turn stillness into progress, to turn rest into insight. Even spiritual practice becomes another project. What did I learn from this? What's the deeper truth here? How does this help me grow? But these questions, repeated often enough, become noise. Because not everything needs to teach. Not everything needs to serve a purpose. Some moments are whole simply because they exist. This is difficult for the thinking mind to accept. It believes life should be a series of steps, Every step must lead somewhere, but presence is not a staircase. It's the ground, and standing still on that ground is not failure, it's freedom. A moment of wind on the skin doesn't need to be inspiring. A breath doesn't need to be profound. A pause doesn't need a lesson. And when the mind stops demanding meaning, peace floods in. Not because something new was found, but because something old was released. This is the sacred uselessness the teachings speak of. A state where the moment is allowed to be itself, free from the pressure to explain, to improve, to produce. In this space, the heart begins to relax, the mind stops measuring, and the present is no longer a tool, it's a home. Buddhism never demands that life always be useful. In fact, it points to the opposite. That the deepest truths arise when we stop chasing them, that the most nourishing peace comes when we stop needing to achieve. Meditation itself is an act of sacred uselessness. You sit, you breathe, and nothing needs to happen, and that nothing is enough. The compulsion to understand everything creates mental clutter, because understanding is not always available. Some feelings have no name. Some moments resist explanation. Some experiences don't carry lessons. And trying to find meaning where there is none only makes the silence feel broken. But silence doesn't need to speak. It doesn't need to validate itself. It doesn't need to give you something in return. It gives by being. And when the mind stops asking, "Why is this here?" it begins to rest in what's here, and what's here is always enough. This shift is subtle but powerful. It turns the ordinary into the sacred, not because of what it means, but because it's seen without interference. A tree is no longer a metaphor, it's just a tree. The sound of rain is no longer symbolic, it's just sound. And in that rawness, something deeper is touched. Not knowledge, not wisdom, but presence. The more the mind lets go of meaning, the more it discovers simplicity. And simplicity is where peace lives, not in answers, but in the absence of the question, not in understanding, but in freedom from needing to understand. Try walking without interpreting. Let each step be just a step. Don't think about what it means. Don't look for insight. Just feel the rhythm, the contact with the earth. Let the walk be pointless. And in that pointlessness, notice how the mind softens, how the breath deepens, how the pressure to get somewhere vanishes. This is not about giving up meaning entirely. It's about letting it arrive when it wants to, not when it's demanded. Real meaning cannot be forced. It arises naturally, like a breeze, like laughter. It shows up when the space is open, not when the mind is clinging. Even in conversation, the need to make every word matter creates pressure. But when you speak without trying to say something profound, the heart begins to speak instead. And when you listen without trying to decode, the other person becomes more than their words. They become presence, and presence always speaks louder than meaning. Letting go of this need brings a different kind of clarity, the kind that doesn't solve problems but makes them irrelevant. Because when you're no longer trying to extract value, you begin to feel value in what already is. The value of sitting with nothing. The value of a moment that doesn't move. The value of just being here without any justification. This is sacred because it returns you to what cannot be measured. Not everything needs to have a result. Not every breath needs to lead to insight. Sometimes The most peaceful experience is the one that gives you nothing, no realization, no lesson, no transformation, just space. And in that space, healing happens, not because something was fixed, but because the need to fix dissolved. The nervous system stops bracing, the thoughts stop spinning, the heart stops performing, and you are left with presence, quiet, unassuming, whole. This is not something the world teaches. The world teaches value through utility, worth through contribution. Even rest must be productive. But the Dharma points elsewhere. It points to the lotus that blooms in still water, to the breath that flows for no reason, to the silence that gives everything by giving nothing. Let yourself taste that now. Sit, breathe. Let the moment arrive without a message. Let it be free of insight, free of depth, free of progress. And in that freedom, feel what opens. A space where meaning is no longer needed, where you are no longer a seeker, just presence, just awareness, just now. And when the mind returns with its questions, what was that for? What did I gain? Smile gently. Let the questions pass. Let the moment be untouchable. Let it rest in its own sacred uselessness. Because some of the most beautiful moments in life are the ones that don't teach, don't change, don't improve. They just are. And when you allow them to be as they are, without reaching, without squeezing meaning from them, you begin to see that peace has never been hidden. It's only been masked by your attempts to define it. Now that the urge to find meaning in every breath has been softened and the heart has begun to rest in moments that offer no lesson, another form of inner noise begins to show its face more clearly. A mental habit so common it often goes unnoticed. Judgment. Not dramatic condemnation, not loud criticism, but the quiet, relentless reflex of forming opinions, the constant mental labeling of everything as good or bad, better or worse, helpful or wasteful. This subtle evaluation follows every step, every sound, every thought. It disguises itself as awareness, as intelligence, even as discernment. But it is noise, and that noise keeps the mind from ever truly being still. The judging mind is fast. It doesn't wait. It reacts instantly. Too loud. Too slow. Not enough. Almost right. It moves like a shadow, staying just behind every experience. It comments on the temperature of the room, the look on someone's face, the way the breath feels today. And with each opinion, no matter how soft, the mind contracts. It moves away from being and into evaluation. And with that movement, the silence that was beginning to grow is interrupted. Buddhist teaching is clear about this tendency. It points out that one of the most subtle forms of clinging is not to objects, not to people, not even to memories, but to opinions, to the belief that the mind's commentary is correct, that it's necessary, that you need to hold a position about every moment. But what if you don't? What if the moment doesn't need your opinion to exist? Letting go of opinions doesn't mean becoming passive. It doesn't mean losing intelligence. It means releasing the compulsive habit of mentally sorting everything into categories. When the mind is no longer trying to assign value to every second, something softer appears. Presence. A deeper kind of presence that no longer leans forward to decide, compare, or conclude. A kind of awareness that just rests, not in indifference, but in openness. This openness is not dull. It's awake, but it's quiet. It doesn't say, "This is right," or "This is wrong." It just listens, just observes. And in that observation, the world becomes simpler. Not because it's less, but because it's no longer being divided by thought. The habit of judging isn't just tiring, it's endless. The mind doesn't just judge events, it judges its own judgments. That was a stupid thing to think. I'm too reactive. I shouldn't be judging. And each layer adds another veil over the moment, another thread in the web of noise. And the only way to step out is to stop following that thread. You don't need to fix the judgments. You don't need to replace negative ones with positive ones. That's still judging. What you can do is notice. Ah, there's judgment. And then let it pass, like any other thought. You don't need to believe it. You don't need to follow it. You just need to not grab it. Even judgments that feel helpful, like "this is peaceful," can become noise when they're clung to, because the moment becomes less about peace and more about your assessment of it. You start watching the experience through the lens of preference. And preference, no matter how light, still pulls you out of presence. This doesn't mean you become numb. It means you stop dividing. The moment becomes whole again. No parts to praise, no parts to fix. Just this: the temperature of the air, the pressure in your chest, the sound in the distance, all allowed, all equal, no rankings, no labels, just life as it is. You might think judgment is necessary for survival, and in some situations, discernment is useful. But most of the time, judgment is just mental noise trying to manage what doesn't need to be managed. You don't need to have an opinion about every sound, every glance, every breath. You can just be here without wrapping it in commentary. Try this now. Wherever you are, listen to the sounds around you. Notice how the mind immediately forms opinions. Too quiet. That's annoying. I like this one. Then pause. Let the judgments rise and let them fall. Don't stop them, but don't feed them. Let sound be sound. Let sensation be sensation. Let the moment be free of conclusion. This is the death of opinion, not through suppression, but through disinterest, through letting go of the belief that your mental stance matters. It doesn't. The bird still sings. The wind still moves. The breath still flows. Without your opinion, the world continues, and you begin to feel lighter, because opinion is weight. It turns awareness into pressure. It turns freedom into strategy. But when it drops away, the mind stops holding everything so tightly. There's more room to breathe, more space inside your chest, and silence stops being a goal and becomes your natural state. You begin to feel this shift in small ways. A conversation without forming conclusions. A moment of pain without labeling it bad. A pause in your day that feels full without needing to be productive. These are signs of a mind unburdened, a mind no longer shaping everything into something it can manage. And when judgment does return, and it will, you meet it with the same spaciousness. Not with judgment, but with compassion. You see it rise, you name it, you let it fall. And in that gentle allowing, the mind learns something radical. It can rest without evaluating. It can breathe without choosing a side. The more this deepens, the more the mind becomes like a mirror. It reflects everything, but it holds nothing. It doesn't say, "This reflection is better than that one." It just reflects, clearly, quietly. And in that reflection, reality is finally seen as it is, not as better or worse, just whole. This is not detachment, it's intimacy. Real intimacy with life, not filtered through preference, not dulled by opinion, just direct connection. The kind that doesn't need commentary to feel complete. Now that the weight of constant judgment has been loosened, and the mind no longer tries to sort every moment into right or wrong, something profound begins to stir beneath the surface, a form of presence that doesn't speak, doesn't react, and doesn't prepare a reply. It listens, but not the way most people listen, not with filters, not with preparation, not with agreement or disagreement, just listening, fully, deeply, without thinking. This kind of listening is not passive, it is awake, and it is one of the most direct ways to silence the mind without force, because when true listening begins, thought has nothing left to do. The practice of listening like a Buddha is simple but not easy. It means letting sound arrive without resistance and without adding layers of meaning, not just listening to others, but to everything, the world, the body. Silence. It means hearing without analysis, without preparing your opinion while the other person is still speaking, without mentally comparing, defending, or fixing. This kind of listening brings peace because it does something extraordinary. It removes the self from the center. Ordinary listening is filled with self. Do I agree with this? How should I respond? Does this threaten what I believe? All of that is thought pretending to listen, but underneath that noise, there's another way of receiving sound. A way that doesn't divide, that doesn't defend, that just lets what's being said be heard as it is. In Buddhist teachings, this is called bare attention. It means allowing the moment to register in your awareness without changing it. Hearing a sound and not calling it pleasant or unpleasant. Listening to a voice and not deciding whether it's right or wrong, just letting it be sound. Vibrations, expressions, without any mental hand reaching to catch and shape them. This kind of listening is powerful because it turns off the part of the mind that needs to interpret everything. It's not that thought disappears completely. It's that thought no longer holds the front of the stage. It becomes background. The mind learns to open like a window, not like a judge's bench. You can feel this shift in the body. Regular listening creates tension. There's a slight forward lean, a tightness in the face, a readiness to respond. But deep listening creates space. The shoulders drop, the breath slows, the chest opens. Because there's nothing to prove, nothing to protect. Just sound being heard. Try it in conversation. When someone speaks, don't plan your reply. Don't evaluate what they're saying. Just receive it. Let the words pass through your ears into stillness. If a thought arises, don't fight it. Just don't feed it. Don't follow it. Return to the sound. You'll begin to notice something unexpected. That people feel safer around you, not because you agree with them, but because you're not interrupting their presence with your own mental reactions. You're giving them space to be heard, not just by you, but by silence itself. And the benefit isn't just for them, it's for you. The more you listen without thinking, the quieter your mind becomes. because you're not adding to the moment. You're not turning sound into story. You're not translating life into commentary. This also applies to sounds outside of conversation. Wind, birds, distant traffic. Let these sounds reach you without naming them. Don't say, "That's a bird." Just hear the pitch, the rhythm, the quality. Let your awareness rest on the sound the way sunlight rests on water, warm, weightless, effortless. Over time, this practice begins to change how you experience everything. You no longer need words to explain what's happening. The experience becomes enough. You don't need to name peace to feel it. You don't need to analyze pain to stay with it. The mind begins to rest in direct contact, not in thought, in presence. And this presence begins to fill more moments. Not just the quiet ones, but the difficult ones. When someone is upset, when noise is loud, when opinions are strong, instead of reacting, you stay present. You hear the words, but you don't become the story. You feel the emotion, but you don't become the storm. This is not detachment. It's intimacy without clinging. It's listening without turning the world into a mirror of your own thoughts. The ego doesn't get to hijack the experience. The moment is free to speak, and you are free not to react. This is why deep listening is a kind of meditation. It stills the mind without effort. It silences the self by dissolving its role. Because when you're really listening, there's no time to be someone, no time to perform, just awareness, open and alert. In Zen, they say the sound of a bell doesn't teach, it awakens. The point isn't what it means, the point is how fully it's heard. And when the mind stops talking over every sound, the whole world begins to teach, not with ideas, but with presence. Start small. 1 moment a day, choose to listen completely. To your breath, to a friend, to a random sound. Let it be your teacher, not in what it says, but in how it returns you to this moment, raw and untouched. And when the habit to think returns, as it will, meet it softly. Notice it. Don't judge it, but gently turn your awareness back to the sound. Let the world come in through your ears instead of through your thoughts. Eventually, you won't need to remember to listen. Listening will become the background. Thinking will be the interruption. And the mind will begin to understand something words could never teach. That silence is not the absence of sound. It's the absence of commentary. Now that the mind has begun to listen without reacting, and the inner commentary has started to dissolve into silence, what remains is a new kind of space, open, receptive, still. But even in this openness, the habit of thinking doesn't vanish overnight. It lingers. It finds ways to return, to sneak in through imagination, worry, memory. Yet there is a path to quiet that thinking cannot follow, a door thought cannot unlock. The body. Not the body as a concept or an object, but as direct, lived sensation. Pure, raw, wordless experience. And when awareness fully enters the body without trying to explain it, the mind falls into the background, quieted not by force, but by displacement. The mind can only hold one thing clearly at a time. When attention is rooted in thought, the body fades. But when attention returns to the body, not as something to label or control, but as something to feel. The stream of thinking weakens, not because it was pushed away, but because it was no longer needed. Awareness only has so much energy, and when that energy flows into sensation, the fuel that thoughts survive on runs out. This is the hidden power of embodiment, not just as a practice for health, but as a doorway to silence. Because the body does not think in language, it doesn't analyze, it doesn't judge, it experiences fully, instantly. And when you begin to experience alongside it rather than above it in your thoughts, the experience of peace deepens. This kind of embodiment is not about technique. It's not about scanning or relaxing or fixing posture. It's about coming home, letting attention drop out of the head and settle into the feet, the chest, the fingertips, the curve of your spine, the rise and fall of your belly. No explanation, no naming, just pure, unfiltered presence. Try sitting right now and shifting your awareness from what you're thinking to what you're physically feeling. Not what you think about the feeling, but the direct texture of it, the temperature of your hands, the subtle hum in your legs, the pull of gravity on your shoulders. And notice what happens to thought, not immediately, but gradually. It softens, it fades, it becomes like background static instead of the center of attention. This is not suppression. It's redirection. Thought is not being fought. It's being left behind, not ignored, but bypassed. Because your attention is now fully occupied by something deeper, something older, something closer to reality than any thought can ever be. In Buddhism, this is often called mindfulness of the body. But that word, mindfulness, can sometimes mislead, because this isn't about mindful thinking. It's about being so present in the body that the mind finally gets to rest, so completely inside the rhythm of breathing that thought forgets to interfere. This form of awareness is not distant. It doesn't watch from above. It doesn't float. It roots. It grounds. It spreads from the soles of your feet into the bones of your spine, from the breath in your lungs to the beat in your chest. This isn't mystical, it's practical. The most direct way to unplug from overthinking is to plug into sensation, and the more you rest in the body without trying to use it, the more the body reveals itself as alive, as intelligent, as naturally still. You begin to feel the pulse of presence, not as an idea, but as a vibration, a hum that doesn't ask questions, that doesn't need answers, that just is. This kind of embodiment brings a humility to practice, because the body doesn't care how spiritual you are. It doesn't ask whether you're enlightened. It only asks that you show up, that you feel, that you let go of trying to understand and finally allow yourself to be. When you're in the body fully, the mind stops narrating, because there's no space left for commentary, and the stillness you were chasing begins to reveal itself as the natural state of being that was always there, hidden behind a wall of thoughts you didn't even realize you were listening to. You start to walk differently, not trying to walk better, just more aware. Your steps slow, your muscles soften, the ground feels more real, because your attention is now in your feet, not your plans. You're no longer walking to get somewhere, you're walking to feel the act of walking. Even eating becomes different. The taste, the texture, the warmth. When the mind isn't analyzing every bite, The food becomes more alive, more satisfying, not because it changed, but because your relationship with the moment did. And when pain arises, which it will, you stay with it, not to fix it, not to name it, just to feel it. Let it burn, let it pulse, let it speak through sensation instead of thought, and notice how it changes, how it moves, how it dissolves without your intervention. The body knows how to release. It just needs the mind to get out of the way. Over time, you begin to feel that the body itself is a temple of silence. Not because it's always comfortable, but because it doesn't talk, it doesn't spin, it doesn't divide the world into concepts. It just feels. And that feeling, when met fully, becomes the end of mental noise. This is why monks sweep floors slowly, why they eat in silence, why they walk without distraction. Not because those actions are holy, but because they keep awareness in the body, because every action becomes a meditation when it's embodied, when it's lived, not just thought about. And the more this happens, the more thought begins to retreat. It stops trying to help. It stops trying to add meaning, because it realizes it's not needed here. The body is enough. The breath is enough. The moment in its raw sensation is enough. And that's where true quiet begins. Not in a thoughtless sky, but in the ground beneath your feet. In the hands you're using to wash a cup. In the neck you feel stretching as you lie down. In the spine that holds you upright as you breathe. Every cell of your body becomes a doorway to peace. Not later, not with practice, right now. Now that awareness has settled deeply into the body and thought has lost its grip through direct, wordless sensation, the silence begins to feel more stable, more natural. But just as the mind starts to rest, another disturbance quietly slips in, more subtle than noise, more refined than distraction. A craving, not for objects, not for pleasure, but for stillness itself. The desire to stay in peace, to maintain emptiness, to keep the quiet going. And in that craving, even if it's spiritual, the noise returns, not through sound, but through tension, through grasping, through the mind once again trying to hold something that can only be received when it's not being chased. This is one of the last illusions on the path to true emptiness, the belief that silence can be possessed. That stillness is something to achieve and keep. But the very act of wanting to be calm is what disturbs calmness. It turns peace into a goal, and the mind, even if it no longer thinks about the past or the future, now starts thinking about being peaceful. That too is thought. That too is a disturbance. Buddhism speaks clearly about this. Craving is not only about desire for pleasure or escape. It includes craving for spiritual states, craving for clarity, craving for insight, and most dangerously, craving for peace. Because this craving wears the robe of wisdom, it hides behind noble intentions. But it still clenches, it still reaches, it still says, "This moment is not enough. I must get somewhere better." And that very idea cuts you off from the place you're trying to reach. Real stillness doesn't respond to pressure. It cannot be manipulated. It arrives naturally when nothing is being added to the moment, when there is no more grasping, when awareness stops chasing and starts resting. This craving can show up in many forms. I was peaceful earlier. Why not now? If I breathe deeper, maybe I'll feel stillness again. This practice was working yesterday. All of these are thoughts wearing the mask of care, but underneath they are demands, quiet ones, but demands nonetheless. To move beyond this, the mind must learn how to truly rest, not just in the absence of thoughts, but in the absence of wanting anything from this moment. Not even the desire to stay free of desire. Let the moment be hollow. Let it be plain. Let it be nothing special. This is where true peace waits. You don't have to push away the craving. That would just create another layer of resistance. You don't have to analyze it. You don't have to fix it. You just have to see it clearly, to feel it when it arises. That tightening in the chest, that subtle expectation, that small inner push to keep the silence alive. And when you see it, don't react. Don't get involved. Let it be there. Let it rise and fall. And through your non-engagement, it will weaken. Every time the mind says, hold on to this peace, respond with stillness. Not by agreeing, not by arguing, just by letting that thought pass like a leaf on a river. The river doesn't stop for a leaf, and your presence doesn't have to stop for craving. This is how silence deepens, not when it's held tightly, but when it's allowed to come and go like breath. It's not your job to protect peace. Peace does not need protection. It only needs space. It only needs the absence of pressure. The more you relax your grip, the more you notice that peace is not fragile. It doesn't shatter when thought returns. It doesn't disappear because craving appeared. It waits, beneath it all, ready to be seen again once the mind lets go of trying to own it. Try sitting now with no goal, no technique, no expectation. Don't chase stillness. Don't create calm. Just be. And when thoughts rise, let them. When restlessness stirs, feel it. When silence fades, accept it, all of it. This is not failure. This is the path. And in that openness, the strange paradox appears. Stillness is strongest when you don't care if it's there. When you stop craving it, it comes. When you stop needing it to stay, it settles, like water that stops rippling the moment nothing touches it. You begin to trust the silence, not because it's always present in the way you expect, but because you realize it's always underneath. It's not lost. It's only temporarily hidden by the mind's reaching. And when reaching stops, the silence is already here. Even in daily life, this craving shows up. A moment of peace during a walk, followed by the mind saying, "Don't lose this." And then it's gone. Not because peace vanished, but because the craving replaced it. Wanting it too much became the very thing that blocked it. Freedom comes when you stop trying to arrange the moment, when you let go of your ideas about what peace should feel like, how it should last, what it should deliver. Peace doesn't deliver anything. It's not a gift. It's not a transaction. It's a return, a remembering, and it requires nothing. The deepest peace is not the result of a successful practice. It's what's left when practice is no longer needed. When you stop meditating to get somewhere and start meditating because there's nowhere else to be. This is what the old Zen masters meant when they said, "When you seek it, you lose it." The seeking is the very act that creates distance. But when you stop, when you truly stop, not out of apathy, but out of trust, Then it arrives, quietly, gently, without announcement. And it doesn't stay because you earned it. It stays because you stopped asking it to. You stopped performing for it. You stopped needing it to reward you. Let yourself be ordinary. Let your practice be plain. Let this moment be simple. If peace arises, let it. If it doesn't, let that too. Don't wait for silence. Don't chase calm. Sit in the middle of whatever is happening and let it all be enough. Now that even the desire for peace has been released and the craving for silence has been met with stillness rather than pursuit, something quieter begins to unfold, so subtle it almost feels like nothing. No reaching, no doing, no hoping. But in this space where nothing is being demanded from the moment, what was once thought to be you starts to feel less solid. The one who was watching, the one who was letting go, the one who was aware. This witness, which for so long seemed like the final step, the part that remained still while everything else moved, begins to reveal itself as just another layer, a gentle veil, a final division. And even that can fall away. This isn't something that can be forced. The witness dissolves only when it's no longer needed, when presence is no longer separated from what's present, when awareness stops observing and becomes the very fabric of what is being seen. There is no "I am aware of this." There is only this. For a long time on the path, the witness is useful. It helps create space. It pulls attention away from thoughts and emotions. It allows awareness to step back and observe without getting entangled. But eventually, this stepping back becomes a kind of posture, a position, a subtle self, a final layer of identity saying, "I am the one who is watching." And even though this watcher may be silent, peaceful, and kind, it is still separate, still standing apart from what is. And this separation, even at its quietest, creates division. Buddhist teachings point gently toward this, that the deepest freedom is not in the clarity of the observer, but in the disappearance of the boundary between observer and observed. Not in the one who is aware, but in the falling away of the one altogether. What remains is not emptiness in a negative sense, but the fullness of no one being there to claim the moment. To reach this, nothing new needs to be done. In fact, doing will only strengthen the observer. This step is not about doing, it's about dissolving. The shift begins by noticing how subtle the I still is. The I that says, "I'm aware now. I'm present now." That I is quiet, but it's still a thought, still a center. And as long as there is a center, there is duality. There is someone here and something there. But reality is not split. You can begin to feel this by softening the watching, not turning away, not dulling, but loosening the need to stand apart. Let attention fall not on an object, not on a subject, but on the whole field. Let there be no focus, just open presence. You're not observing your breath. You are the breath. You're not listening to a sound. You are the hearing itself. Not "I hear," just hearing. Not "I feel," just feeling. No one inside, no object outside, just this. At first, the mind will want to reclaim this, to describe it. This is non-duality. This is merging. But even those thoughts pull you back into the witness, into a position. into someone standing just outside the experience. Let even those thoughts go. Don't push them. Don't fight them. Just stop feeding them. Let experience unfold without commentary, without someone to have the experience. This is not blankness, it's not a void. It's life, unfiltered, undivided, raw, complete. There's no longer anyone watching life, just life happening. The breath breathes, sound sounds, thought may even arise, but there's no thinker. It's like waves in the ocean. No one owns them. They just move. And in this, the sense of self quietly vanishes. And when the self is gone, silence deepens beyond anything effort could create. Because silence is no longer something you're in. It's what you are. Not a silence between things. A silence that includes all things, even movement, even sensation, even thought, but without ownership, without center, just unfolding, just being. This state can't be held. If you try to hold it, the witness returns. It can't be maintained. If you try to maintain it, a doer reappears. It's not something you get into. It's something that appears when you stop claiming presence as yours, when there's no one left to practice, just the practice practicing itself. The reason this is so rarely described is because words themselves are a return to duality. The moment you say, "I merged," it's over. The merging never happened to someone. It happened when someone was no longer there, and so this moment can never be remembered properly, never owned, never repeated. It's a gift that arrives when the ground is ready, when all clinging, even to awareness, has fallen. That's why the final instruction is no instruction. Just be, not as a someone who is being, just being. Let what's seen be seen, let what's felt be felt, and let the boundary fall away. It may start as a moment, a flash, a pause between thoughts where everything feels wide, borderless, where you disappear and yet nothing is missing. Over time, these flashes stretch. They last longer, until presence without position becomes the new normal. And the sense of a watcher seems strange, like a game you used to play. Even when the witness returns, and it will, there's no need to resist. Just see it. Don't fight it. Don't follow it. Let it fade like mist in sunlight. The more softly you allow it to appear and dissolve, the more natural the shift becomes. And when the shift stabilizes, life continues. But it feels different, simpler, lighter. There's no one holding it all, no self protecting a story, no one trying to get it right. Just this, just now, and that's enough. Not because you chose to make it enough, but because there's no one left who needs more. This is the end of the journey, not a destination, but a disappearance. The mind no longer tries to escape itself, because there's no longer a self to escape. What remains is pure presence, not yours, not mine, just what is. And in that presence, peace doesn't come and go. It doesn't rise and fall with mood. It doesn't depend on anything, because peace is not a state. It's the absence of division. It's the end of the search. Now that the witness has dissolved, and there is no longer a center from which to observe or manage experience, the mind enters a deeper stillness, one that doesn't rely on awareness as a position, but flows as undivided presence. Yet, even here, in this openness, One final habit remains. It doesn't shout or pull. It whispers, it waits, a barely noticeable tension, like a thread in the background, waiting for the next thought, waiting for the next insight, waiting for the next thing to appear. And that waiting, gentle as it may be, is still doing. It is still a form of reaching. And that reaching keeps the mind from completely falling into rest. This anticipation is subtle. It's not the kind that anxiously hopes or nervously plans. It's more refined, more spiritual in disguise. It's the quiet scan for what comes next. The mental posture that leans forward just slightly, ready to catch whatever arises. Even after the self has been seen through, even after thought has softened and awareness has dropped all commentary, there can still be this readiness, a low hum of mental preparation, and as long as it remains, the mind cannot fully let go. In Buddhist language, this is still grasping, not for objects or stories or identity, but for continuity, for the next moment of experience. It's the mind trying to stay in control by staying aware of what's coming, but true awareness doesn't anticipate. It doesn't wait for the next moment to begin. It is the space that allows all moments without reaching for them. This is where the deepest surrender begins, not of effort, but of expectation. The expectation that something will happen. That thought will return. That silence must be maintained. That awareness should stay awake. Even this is too much. Even this is extra. Surrendering the next thought doesn't mean trying to stop it. It means giving up the need to be ready for it. It means letting go of the quiet watcher who waits to see what happens. It means resting in such complete openness that if nothing arises, that too is allowed. And if something arises, it passes through without being anticipated, without being caught. You can feel this habit if you sit still enough. There's a tension in the center of the forehead, a slight forward tilt in attention, a readiness to register whatever appears. Drop it. Let attention fall back. Not onto anything, just let it fall. Let it dissolve into the field. The mind may protest. But what if I lose presence? What if a thought sneaks in unnoticed? What if I miss the moment? These are just more thoughts, more attempts to manage what doesn't need managing. You can't miss now, because now doesn't need your readiness. It only needs your absence of resistance. In deep meditation, this anticipation often shows up right after silence begins to feel stable. The mind, unused to not doing, quietly prepares for interruption. It waits for the thought that always comes. But this very waiting prevents the depth from deepening. It keeps the mind in the role of the gatekeeper, and as long as the gatekeeper is there, something is being held. What's required now is the simplest form of letting go. Not letting go of emotion or narrative, but of readiness itself. Let attention rest so fully that there is no one left scanning the horizon. Let the breath rise and fall without waiting for it. Let the next moment come without leaning into it. Let thought appear or not appear without watching for it. This is pure allowing, the end of all positions, not even a stance of being open, just openness itself, not even a preference for peace, just space, untouched. You may begin to notice the body letting go in a new way. The muscles of the face soften, The tongue rests on the floor of the mouth. The eyes, even closed, stop directing energy. The mind drops back like a leaf falling into water. No splash, no target, just down. And then something rare happens. Thought doesn't disappear, but its cycle slows. Without anticipation to sustain it, the machinery winds down. The next thought may come, but it finds no grip, no waiting hand to receive it, no mind leaning toward it. It lands and dissolves before it has shape. Even awareness, once sharp and vigilant, now becomes soft and peripheral. Not gone, but passive. Present, but uninvested. There is no spotlight, no mental scanner. Just a field, wide and still. From here, the idea of practice fades, because practice suggests repetition, intention, structure. But this space can't be practiced. It can only be returned to through the deepest surrender. Not a surrender of discipline, but of interest, of effort, of holding. Let even the impulse to be aware be released. Awareness doesn't need your help. It doesn't need to be kept alive. The sky doesn't need you to hold it up. Silence doesn't need you to stay focused. Let all of it go. Let thought rise as it may. Let sensation pass like wind. Let sound come and go. But you, what you thought was you, have no more job, no more control, no more anticipation. What's left is stillness without edges, a stillness that no longer fears movement. Because it is not threatened by the next thing, it is not disturbed by what comes or goes. It doesn't prepare, it doesn't resist, it doesn't care if another thought appears, because it knows it doesn't need to be ready. This is rest, not as escape, but as complete absence of strategy. You are no longer the meditator, no longer the seeker, no longer the one watching from behind the curtain. The curtain has dropped. The play has ended, but the stage remains. Lit by a light that needs no source. And even if a thought comes now, even if it brings a story or a judgment, it fades quickly, because there's no one left waiting to hear it. It passes like a whisper in an empty room. You are not the breath, not the silence, not even the witness. You are what remains when all roles have been dropped and nothing is expected next. Now, let the next moment unfold as it will. No tension, no guarding. Let thought arise without meeting it. Let stillness be interrupted without resisting it. Let everything pass through this space as if through open air. You have surrendered the next thought, and in that surrender, you've touched the deepest form of rest, not because the mind is silent, but because you no longer live at the center of what arises. Stay here. Nothing more is needed. You've just taken a journey few ever dare to take, not outward into the world, but inward, into the silence most people spend their whole lives avoiding. One by one, the layers of noise fell away. Thought was seen for what it is, not truth, just movement. The need to get it right, let go. The craving for peace, released. Even the witness, the final quiet watcher, dissolved into stillness. And what remained wasn't blankness. It wasn't emptiness in the hollow sense. It was openness, space, freedom. The kind of peace that doesn't come and go because it's not something you do. It's what you are when you stop trying to be anything else. You learned how the mind fills itself through naming, watching, remembering, judging, striving, and with each lesson you loosened the knot. You rested between breaths. You stopped chasing the next thought. And slowly, gently, reality stopped being something to manage and became something to merge with. No edges, no center, just this, pure and present. If something inside you feels different right now, don't rush to define it. Let it settle. Let it deepen. The more you rest, the more it will reveal itself. You don't need to hold on to anything you learned. True understanding lives in what you don't carry. Now, take a breath. Feel the weightlessness. And if these teachings brought even a moment of peace, consider writing, "I am the silence," in the comments so we know you made it to the end. Let us know what shifted in you, and if you want to keep emptying the mind in the most beautiful way possible, subscribe and turn on notifications. This is just the beginning of your return to what was never lost. Now close your eyes, let everything go. The silence knows the way.